Narcissus and the First Selfie. Boring Greek myth. At dawn, when the air is cool and the pond lies still as glass, a lone youth pauses on the mossy bank. Sunrise dusts the water with soft gold, willow leaves drift gentle as sighs. Yet this scene isn't the start of some solemn tragedy. It's the quiet, soft launch of history's very first selfie. He leans closer, curious, and the surface answers with a face so flawless it steals his breath. No marble statue, no polished bronze, only a living mirror waiting to be admired. One careless glance becomes a quiet fascination, and fascination becomes the wish to keep that moment forever. With neither lens nor canvas, Narcissus begins a tender experiment. Angling petals for light, guiding ripples to frame a portrait only he can see. The world is hushed. The branches, the birds, even time itself. While he searches for the perfect reflection, believing a single still image might hold the secret of his beauty. So begins a silent story of a boy, a mirror pool, and the very first longing to capture oneself. Before filters, before cameras, when every memory lived and vanished on the water's skin. Chapter 1. The Pond and the Perfect Stranger. The sun, a benevolent spotlight, dripped gold onto the surface of the pond. It shimmered, a liquid mirror reflecting the azure sky and the emerald fringe of willow trees that bowed over its banks. And then there he was. Narcissus, a vision sculpted from moonlight and arrogance, stumbled upon this watery reflection, and his life, as he knew it, imploded. He wasn't just handsome, he was a walking, talking Instagram filter. His hair, the color of spun gold, cascaded down his shoulders like a waterfall of perfectly placed highlights. His skin, smooth as polished marble, was the envy of every nymph and dryad within a 10-mile radius. He possessed the kind of jawline that could launch 1,000 ships, or at least 1,000 thirsty likes on a carefully curated profile. But this wasn't some Instagram-worthy moment captured on a high-definition phone. This was the raw, unfiltered, pre-Photoshop genesis of the selfie. This was the original, the OG, the first ever attempt at capturing the essence of self-obsession in a single breathtaking, or rather breath-holding image. He saw his reflection, and a gasp escaped his perfectly sculpted lips. It wasn't just admiration, it was awe, pure and unadulterated. This wasn't him, or so he thought. This was something more, a demigod perhaps, a long-lost twin from a parallel universe fueled by protein shakes and designer water. He wasn't sure, but he was absolutely, positively, utterly smitten. This perfect stranger, shimmering in the pond's embrace, demanded attention. He needed to be documented, immortalized, shared with the world, or at least the nymphs who frequently sunbathed on the opposite bank. The problem? Narcissus didn't possess a smartphone, a selfie stick, or even a decent understanding of optics. But he did possess an abundance of vanity and a surprisingly resourceful mind. First, the lighting. It had to be perfect, you see. He carefully adjusted his position, moving with the balletic grace of a narcissistic swan, until the sun's rays hit his face at the most flattering angle. He used lily pads as makeshift reflectors, creating a soft, diffused glow that highlighted his cheekbones and banished any hint of shadow. Reeds, meticulously placed, provided a natural frame, mimicking the aesthetic of a carefully curated Instagram post. He was a one-man art director, his body the masterpiece, the pond his studio. Next, the background. It needed to be as immaculate as he was. He painstakingly removed any stray leaves or twigs that dared to intrude upon his radiant perfection. He rearranged the wildflowers, creating a vibrant, almost psychedelic tapestry behind him. This wasn't just a selfie. This was a carefully constructed narrative, a visual poem dedicated to the glorious self. And then came the hardest part, the technology. There were no smartphones, remember? No sophisticated camera lenses. Only the raw materials of nature. Smooth, reflective stones. polished pieces of wood, and a frankly ridiculous amount of glistening dewdrops strategically positioned on the aforementioned lily pads to achieve that coveted dewy-skinned look. He envisioned a device, a wondrous contraption that would capture his beauty forever, a device he later decided he would call a self-viewer, or SVer for short. His first attempts were nothing short of disastrous. The reflective stones, while perfectly smooth, were simply too small to capture a flattering image. The polished wood, while aesthetically pleasing, proved too rough to achieve the desired clarity. The dewdrops, while brilliantly iridescent, were unfortunately unstable, constantly sliding out of position with every subtle movement. The results were a blurry mess of distorted features, a series of failed attempts that would have broken the spirit of a lesser man. But not Narcissus. His vanity, it seemed, was impervious to setback. He tried positioning his makeshift camera at different angles, always prioritizing the flawless capture of his divine features. He experimented with different natural filters, holding leaves and flowers before the reflective surfaces, experimenting with the subtle shifts in light and shadow. Each failed attempt, however, fueled his resolve. This was a challenge, yes, a test of his ingenuity, a trial he was utterly determined to conquer. The perfect selfie, his holy grail, was within his grasp. He just had to find the right tools and the right technique, the perfect stillness. Because as he soon discovered, and this was pivotal, the camera only worked if he remained completely motionless. Any slight tremor, any involuntary blink, resulted in another blurry catastrophe. The sunset painted the sky in hues of fiery orange and deep violet, casting long shadows that stretched across the pond. Narcissus, exhausted but undeterred, continued his quest. He was no mere mortal, but a pioneer, a visionary. He was the first selfie taker, a pioneer in the art of self-obsession, paving the way for future generations of filters, influencers, and a legion of perfectly polished, digitally enhanced faces. And all of this quest, this obsessive devotion, it all started with a simple reflection in a pond. A reflection that turned out to be a lot more complicated than he initially realized. This wasn't just a reflection, it was the launch of 1,000, or rather 1,000,000 selfies. And it all began with a single, frustrating, ultimately flawed attempt, the first ever selfie in human history. The water rippled, disturbed not by a gentle breeze, but by Narcissus's frantic adjustments. He shifted, a restless statue obsessed with the perfect pose, his reflection wavering like a glitching video feed. And then, from the willow trees that draped themselves over the pond's edge, a voice, fractured and uneven, began to speak. It was Echo, her voice a distorted echo of Narcissus's own self-congratulatory pronouncements. Perfect, 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 she repeated, each syllable a little off-key, a little broken like a scratched record skipping across its grooves. Radiant, radiant, radiant. The repetition wasn't a soothing harmony. It was a maddening, inescapable loop, a soundtrack to Narcissus's vanity. "Oh, the light! The divine light!" Narcissus exclaimed, tilting his head to catch the sun's rays at precisely the right angle. "Divine, divine, divine." Echo's voice echoed, thinner now, almost a whisper carried on the wind. It was a glitchy commentary, a frustrated, repetitive observation of his self-absorption. He adjusted a lily pad, creating a more flattering shadow on his jawline. "My jawline, sculpted by the gods themselves," he murmured, admiring his handiwork. "Sculpted, sculpted, sculpted," Echo replied, each repetition a little fainter, a little more ragged. Her curse, it seemed, wasn't just about repetition, it was about the slow, agonizing erosion of her voice, mirroring the subtle decay of Narcissus's sanity. Narcissus, lost in his narcissistic reverie, didn't seem to notice the ghostly presence commenting on his actions. He was far too busy perfecting his image. He'd gathered more dewdrops, painstakingly arranging them like tiny diamonds on the lily pads to achieve that ethereal glow. The dew, the exquisite dew, it enhances my ethereal glow, he whispered, entranced by his reflection. Ethereal, 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 Echo chanted, her voice now a mere breath, a sigh lost in the rustling leaves. There was a hint of bitterness in her broken repetitions, a subtle, mocking undercurrent beneath the seemingly mindless echo. She'd watched him for hours, this arrogant, self-obsessed creature, and her frustration was palpable, a silent scream trapped within a loop of endlessly repeating phrases. She longed for a moment of clarity, a single coherent sentence, a chance to speak her own mind, to voice her own complaints, rather than this constant degrading imitation. He continued his work, oblivious to her presence. He meticulously arranged reeds behind him to create a natural frame, his reflection mimicking the poses of countless magazine cover models. He was so focused on achieving the perfect image, so engrossed in the mechanics of his self-created camera, that he seemed entirely unaware of the frustration bubbling around him, the frustration of a nymph trapped in a repetitive, agonizing curse, forced to be the soundtrack to Narcissus's delusional self-worship. The reeds, the perfect framing, it elevates the composition, he stated, perfectly pleased with the results of his efforts. Elevates, elevates, elevates. Echo's response was a barely audible murmur, almost imperceptible. It was a testament to the slow, debilitating nature of her curse, a steady erosion of both voice and sanity. It was a subtle, chilling commentary on the emptiness of his self-obsession. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fiery orange and deep purple. The light shifted, altering the angles, and Narcissus adjusted again, his movements still frantic and precise. He was a puppet dancer of his own ego, his every motion dictated by the need for self-perfection. Echo watched, her glitchy commentary slowing, her repetitions becoming shorter, weaker. The curse was taking its toll. The sunset, the breathtaking sunset. It adds depth, drama, he breathed, mesmerized by the changing light. Depth, drama, Echo whispered, the words barely audible, a ghostly sigh carried away by the evening breeze. The loop was breaking down, the fragments of her voice becoming increasingly faint and fragmented. Her curse, it seemed, was mirroring the waning light, losing power as the sun sank below the horizon. The frustration emanating from Echo was almost tangible. It was the frustration of a chorus unable to harmonize, the exasperation of a voice stripped of its own identity, a constant, unrelenting echo of another's vanity. It was a dark, bitter comedy, a modern-day myth playing out in a world where self-obsession was not only tolerated but celebrated. Narcissus, oblivious, continued his pursuit of the perfect selfie, and Echo, trapped in her repetitive curse, remained the silent, glitching commentator, her fractured voice a poignant testament to the emptiness of Narcissus's self-absorbed world. Her curse, a strange, ironic parallel to the digital age's endless scroll of perfectly curated images. For in the end, Echo's fragmented repetitions were the most real thing in Narcissus's utterly artificial world, her broken voice the truest reflection of his vain obsession. The process was arduous. Each attempt at the perfect pose and lighting met with Echo's fragmented, glitching commentary. Stunning, 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 she'd repeat, her voice sometimes a loud, almost hysterical echo, other times barely a whisper lost to the rustling reeds. Sometimes she'd get a whole phrase before the glitch. Beautiful, simply beautiful, but the angle? Before her voice would break and she'd begin again. Stunning, stunning. Narcissus, however, remained completely absorbed in his endeavor. He was building a contraption, a makeshift device from smooth stones and polished wood, attempting to create a mechanism that would capture his perfect image, a primitive camera he believed would be the first of its kind. Echo's commentary, a running counterpoint to his efforts, was simply background noise, a frustrating drone to the symphony of his self-obsession. He experimented with different arrangements of his crude equipment, tweaking the angles and positions tirelessly. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pond, turning the water into a mesmerizing play of light and dark. Echo's voice, however, remained a constant broken refrain. Magnificent, 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 or unparalleled, unparalleled. The repetitions, however, began to subtly shift, a slight variation in pitch, a hint of derision now present in the fragmented words. The frustration, no longer entirely passive, began to subtly infuse the broken phrases with a sharp, biting mockery of Narcissus's obsessive self-regard. She'd add a slightly higher inflection to certain words, highlighting the absurd nature of his self-admiration. Breathtaking, breathtaking, breathlessly. The pause and slight variation in breathlessly, hinting at a weariness with the whole process, and perhaps a little bit of sarcastic humor. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but her curse was evolving, adapting to the frustrating repetition of Narcissus's actions. Her voice was becoming a form of twisted art, a glitch-filled commentary on the digital age's self-obsession, a distorted mirror reflecting the vanity that fueled the quest for the perfect image. Hours passed. The light faded, the stars began to prick the darkening sky, and Narcissus, tired but undeterred, continued his work. He was on the verge of a breakthrough, he felt it. Echo's glitching commentary continued, her voice now little more than a faint whisper, a ghost in the gathering darkness. The repetitions, however, had become less frequent, slower. The curse seemed to be slowing, mirroring the dying light of the day. Perhaps Echo was finally succumbing to exhaustion, her own form of digital fatigue. The fragmented phrases, instead of a chorus of adoration, were now more like a mournful lament, a slow fading echo of Narcissus's empty vanity. The final whisper of perfect, perfect, almost entirely indistinguishable from the whispering wind. His reflection, shimmering in the twilight, spurred him on. The perfect image, elusive as ever, taunted him. It was more than just vanity, it was a quest, a holy grail of self-representation. He had to capture it, possess it, make it eternal. And so Narcissus abandoned the pursuit of mere pose and began to build. His workshop, if it could be called that, was a chaotic explosion of natural debris. The edge of the pond became a cluttered workbench, a jumbled array of materials that spoke of his feverish determination. Smooth gray river stones, painstakingly selected for their size and shape, formed the base of his contraption. These were meticulously arranged, creating a platform sturdy enough to hold the rest of his invention. He'd gathered fallen branches, their bark meticulously scraped away to reveal the smooth, pale wood underneath. These formed the frame, a crude but functional structure that held his makeshift lens in place. The lens itself was perhaps the most ingenious and absurd part of his creation. It was a perfectly round dewdrop captured within a hollowed-out section of a particularly large acorn. The acorn, carefully polished to a high sheen, acted as a protective casing, holding the precious drop in place. The capturing of this dewdrop had been a feat in itself, a delicate operation that required hours of patient waiting, and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate the moment a perfect, spherical bead of moisture would form on a blade of grass. The sheer amount of effort devoted to this single detail spoke volumes about the depth of Narcissus's obsession. He had even, in a moment of inspired madness, attempted to incorporate a system of tiny levers crafted from sharpened thorns, designed to subtly adjust the position of the acorn lens, all in the pursuit of perfect focus. The tools he used were as unconventional as his materials. A sharpened shard of obsidian served as a chisel, carefully carving away at the wood. A smooth, flat stone acted as a hammer, the weight of his blows carefully measured against the delicacy of the wood and the integrity of the acorn lens. He even used spider silk, spun into a fine thread to secure parts of his invention. His fingers, stained with dirt and sap, worked tirelessly, his focus unwavering. This wasn't just the creation of a simple device, it was an act of worship, an offering to his own self-image. Echo, of course, provided her obligatory commentary, her voice a broken soundtrack to his endeavor. Ingenious, 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 she repeated, each phrase fragmented, the glitches adding an almost comical layer to the absurdity of his creation. She even ventured a slightly longer, more coherent phrase at one point, a marvel of engineering, of ingenious engineering, before her voice inevitably devolved back into the familiar, maddening loop. But this time there was a subtle shift, a hint of begrudging admiration in the fractured phrases. Perhaps even the perpetually frustrated nymph found a strange kind of perverse fascination in the sheer dedication of this self-obsessed young man. There was something mesmerizing about the relentless pursuit of the impossible, even when that pursuit was fueled by an overwhelming sense of self-importance. Narcissus, oblivious to the subtleties of Echo's commentary, continued his work. The setting sun cast long shadows, turning his crude workshop into a theater of frantic activity. He experimented with different angles, adjusting the position of his acorn lens with almost religious reverence. He tried to integrate a system of mirrors, polished pieces of obsidian that reflected and refracted the light, an attempt to enhance the brightness and clarity of his reflection. This proved to be particularly challenging, involving hours of meticulous adjustments and numerous failed attempts, met only with Echo's increasingly erratic commentary. Brilliant, brilliant, but the angle, brilliant. The night descended, the stars replacing the sun as the primary source of illumination. Narcissus, working by starlight, adjusted the orientation of his materials. The painstaking process proved exhausting. His fingers ached, his back stiffened, but he persisted, fueled by the approaching revelation. The air hummed with the quiet tension of his focused concentration, the rhythmic sounds of his work, the scrape of obsidian against wood, the soft thud of the stone hammer, created a strange, hypnotic counterpoint to Echo's fragmented echoes. She'd now almost run out of phrases in her repetitive commentary. There was even a strange harmony, a warped, discordant harmony between Narcissus's frantic energy and Echo's increasingly infrequent whispered repetitions. It was a strange ballet of obsession and frustration. He tested his creation. He positioned himself before his device, striving to remain completely still, an effort akin to holding one's breath for an eternity. His reflection wavered. The dewdrop lens seemed to distort the image. The light flickered. He failed multiple times. He adjusted the angles again and again. He refined the position of his mirrors. He meticulously realigned the river stones forming the base of his proto-camera. Each failure was met with Echo's almost melancholic whispers. Perfect. Almost perfect. The subtle variation in tone, the added almost, hinted at a strange sort of weary pity. Then, in the inky blackness of the night, under the silent gaze of the stars, it happened. For a fleeting moment, a perfect image materialized, a perfect capture of his own flawless visage. The acorn lens, the carefully arranged dewdrop, the strategically placed mirrors, all functioned in perfect harmony. It was a brief moment of clarity, a still image that was neither glitchy nor distorted. The image was pristine, perfect. Not a single wrinkle marred the surface of his reflection. It was perfection itself, a masterpiece of narcissistic self-creation. He stared mesmerized. This, he knew, was a triumph. The first selfie, a primitive, technologically backwards selfie, but a selfie nonetheless. A tangible manifestation of his self-obsession. He had overcome the technological limitations of his time and created a device to capture the immortalized image he so desired. He had constructed a tool to forever preserve his perfect self. Echo, her voice a barely audible whisper, added a final fragmented phrase to her commentary. Perfect fool. Her usual repetitive loop now included a chilling, almost coherent observation. It was a small, subtle change, yet it reflected a new dimension to the narrative and an ironic twist to Narcissus's achievement. He had captured the perfect image, but at what cost? The truth was, his perfect image was a testament to nothing more than the boundless depths of his vanity and self-absorption. The question of whether or not the perfect selfie was worth the price of sanity remained unanswered, but the gods, observing from Olympus, were certainly amused. Their laughter echoed across the night sky, a cosmic counterpoint to Narcissus's triumphant, yet ultimately hollow victory. The dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of another day dedicated to the pursuit of self-perfection. And the glitching, ever-evolving commentary of Echo would continue to be the frustrating soundtrack of his obsession. The news, like ripples spreading from a pebble dropped into a still pond, began to spread. Word of Narcissus and his strange contraption reached the ears of the villagers in the neighboring settlement, a place known for its charming cobblestone streets and its suspiciously high concentration of gossips. Unlike Narcissus's secluded existence, this village bustled with activity. Children chased chickens in the dusty squares, while women gossiped over freshly baked bread, their words as sharp and fragrant as the rosemary in their loaves. The contrast between the two settlements was stark. Narcissus's world, a solitary pursuit of self-perfection, versus the bustling, interconnected community of the neighboring village. Initially, the news was met with a mixture of amusement and bewilderment. Old Man Hemlock, known for his penchant for tall tales and even taller pronouncements, declared it a miracle, a testament to the power of human ingenuity. He envisioned a world where everyone could capture their own perfect image, a vision that, to be fair, was slightly less disturbing than Narcissus's actual intentions. Young Alara, ever the pragmatist, saw it as a waste of time, a frivolous pursuit of vanity. "He'd be better off tending his goats," she declared, her words punctuated by the rhythmic bleating of the animals grazing nearby. Others, however, saw something far more intriguing, a business opportunity. Bartholomew, a shrewd merchant with an eye for profit, recognized the potential immediately. He pictured Narcissus's invention not as a mere tool for self-obsession, but as the next big thing, a revolutionary device poised to sweep the land. He envisioned a world saturated with perfectly preserved self-portraits, each one a testament to the power of Bartholomew's marketing prowess. He began to make plans, envisioning a marketing campaign that would appeal to both the vain and the curious, a sophisticated blend of ancient mythology and modern commercialism. His mind, a whirlwind of profit margins and promotional strategies, was already drafting slogans. Capture your divine essence. Unlock your inner god, goddess. Achieve selfie perfection, Narcissus style. He imagined the images splashed across promotional banners, the tagline prominently featured against a backdrop of shimmering dewdrops and perfectly polished acorns. The internet, had it existed in that time, would have exploded. News of Narcissus's invention would have gone viral, spawning countless memes and sparking heated debates on forums and social media platforms. The reactions of the villagers mirrored this hypothetical online frenzy. Some were utterly captivated, fascinated by the technology and its implications, Others were deeply skeptical, questioning Narcissus's sanity and the practicality of his creation. A small but vocal minority saw it as a sign of the apocalypse, a terrifying glimpse into a future where self-obsession reigns supreme. The villagers' conversations mirrored the heated exchanges found in countless online comment sections, a microcosm of the internet's diverse and often contradictory responses to new technology. The discussions in the village tavern, usually dominated by arguments over the price of ale and the merits of different farming techniques, now centered on Narcissus's device. A heated debate erupted between a group of young shepherds who saw the invention as a revolutionary way to document their heroic feats of sheep herding, and a group of elder women who believed it to be a tool of the devil, a pathway to vanity and eternal damnation. A particularly fiery argument even erupted over the proper way to pronounce the name Narcissus, dividing the village into warring factions based on their interpretation of ancient Greek phonetics. The once peaceful village was transformed into a battleground of competing opinions, echoing the chaotic nature of online discourse. Bartholomew, ever the opportunist, capitalized on this burgeoning interest. He organized a demonstration of Narcissus's invention, strategically positioning the device on a small hill overlooking the village. The crowd gathered, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism etched onto their faces. Narcissus, dressed in a newly fashioned robe that he believed enhanced his already flawless features, performed a series of demonstrations, each one met with a range of reactions: gasps of awe, snickers of amusement, and mutterings of disbelief. Echo, meanwhile, provided her usual glitchy commentary, her fragmented phrases barely audible above the murmurs of the crowd. Perfect, stunning, a waste of time. Her words, though repetitive and fragmented, seemed to hold a special significance in this amplified context. She seemed to be commenting not only on Narcissus's invention, but also on the chaotic, divided nature of the villagers' reactions. Her commentary became a strange, distorted soundtrack to the event, a symbol of the frustrating, illogical nature of online discourse. The demonstration was a success, or at least a sort of success. While Narcissus failed to achieve a perfect image consistently, the sheer audacity of his invention, combined with Bartholomew's persuasive marketing, which mainly consisted of shouting loudly and waving his arms, captivated the crowd. Pre-orders poured in, fueled by a potent mix of fascination, vanity, and the herd mentality that makes viral trends so unstoppable. Narcissus, finally receiving some form of external validation, felt a strange blend of triumph and unease. He'd achieved viral fame, but at what cost? His fame seemed less a testament to his ingenuity and more a reflection of the human desire for novelty and the validation that comes with fleeting trends. The gods, observing from Olympus, exchanged knowing glances. They'd expected Narcissus's vanity to lead to his downfall. But this new development, this strange blend of ancient myth and modern marketing, was far more entertaining. The idea of Narcissus, the original influencer, unintentionally creating a revolutionary selfie device was too ironic to ignore. The laughter from Olympus echoed down to earth, a gentle cosmic chuckle that mingled with the whispers of Echo and the excited chatter of the villagers. The viral potential was undeniable. The age of the selfie, albeit a crude acorn lens-based version, had begun. The story of Narcissus, once a simple myth of self-obsession, was now evolving into something much, much bigger, a cautionary tale, a social commentary, and a surprisingly successful business venture, all wrapped up in the ironic package of a perpetually unsatisfied, eternally self-absorbed young man. And Echo, bless her glitching heart, was there to provide the endlessly repetitive soundtrack to it all. The dawn broke, casting a golden light on a world poised to embrace its new obsession. The question, however, remained, was it all truly worth it? Only time and the next viral trend would tell. The air on Mount Olympus, usually thick with the scent of ambrosia and the hum of celestial power, felt strangely stagnant. A hush, unusual even for the usually boisterous gathering of gods, had fallen over the pearly gates. Zeus, king of the gods, idly stroked his beard, his gaze fixed on the shimmering image projected onto a cloud, a live feed of sorts, showcasing Narcissus and his increasingly popular self-portrait device. He looked less like a god surveying his domain and more like a bored executive reviewing quarterly reports. Hera, ever the pragmatist, sighed dramatically. Must we really watch this? Another perfectly crafted selfie? Honestly, Zeus, I've seen more compelling spectacles at a goat milking contest. Her tone dripped with the sort of weary disdain one might reserve for a particularly tedious reality TV show. Ares, the god of war, grumbled his agreement, though his interest in the proceedings seemed to be entirely fueled by the potential for a good brawl. Can't we just smite him? It would be a far more entertaining spectacle than this vanity project. He punctuated his words with a theatrical clash of his spears, causing a nearby nymph to shriek and flee. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, and apparently the only one who'd actually read the latest market research on self-obsession, offered a more measured opinion. While I find his behavior profoundly irritating, and frankly his fashion sense leaves much to be desired, eliminating him seems premature. Consider the potential, Zeus. The man has inadvertently created a device capable of captivating an entire civilization. Imagine the possibilities. We could use his influence for greater purposes. A murmur rippled through the assembled gods. The concept of harnessing Narcissus's vanity for the benefit of Olympus was intriguing, even to the most jaded among them. Poseidon, ever the ocean lover, suggested a subtle shift in the weather patterns around Narcissus's pond, creating dramatic, selfie-enhancing light effects. "Think of the filters!" he exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, approached the issue from a different perspective. The man is undeniably handsome, and his device, while crude, has a certain charm. Perhaps we could offer him a deal. Divine sponsorship in exchange for, say, a more flattering depiction of the gods in his future selfies? Her voice was laced with a playful mischievousness, a thinly veiled suggestion of a strategic marketing campaign disguised as a divine intervention. Hermes, ever the messenger and a master of communication, chimed in with a flurry of ideas. Think of the branding opportunities. Olympus-approved selfies, we could make it huge. We could even create a line of divine filters, godly glow, celestial contour, Mount Olympus majesty. The marketing possibilities are endless. His enthusiasm was infectious, his words spilling out like a never-ending stream of potential hashtags. Meanwhile, Dionysus, god of wine and revelry, seemed less concerned with the marketing potential and more interested in the sheer absurdity of it all. He was currently attempting to carve a miniature chariot out of an olive pit, while simultaneously reciting a drunken ode to the perfection of Narcissus's reflection. His contribution to the discussion, as always, was unique. The debate raged on, a celestial clash of opinions reflecting the ongoing societal discourse surrounding social media influence and the ethics of celebrity culture. The gods, these immortal beings who had witnessed empires rise and fall, were now grappling with the complexities of likes, shares, and viral trends. Their immortal frustration mirrored the human struggle to understand and navigate the ever-evolving landscape of digital culture. Zeus, observing the lively and slightly chaotic debate, chuckled. Perhaps, he mused, stroking his beard once more, we should simply create a new divinity, the god of selfies, and let Narcissus be the first high priest. The idea was met with a mixture of groans, laughter, and surprisingly enthusiastic nods. The gods, it seemed, were finally ready to embrace the absurdity of the situation and capitalize on this unexpected new trend. The age of the selfie, they agreed, would be an interesting one indeed, and perhaps, just perhaps, they might even learn a thing or two about the human obsession with self-image from the perpetually self-absorbed Narcissus, even if it involved a few divine filters along the way. After all, even the gods need a little bit of entertainment, and Narcissus, unintentionally, was providing it in spades. The grand spectacle continued, a testament to the enduring power of vanity, the unpredictable nature of human behavior, and the surprisingly adaptable nature of the immortal gods. The ripples of Narcissus's actions continued to spread far beyond the confines of his secluded pond, rippling across the earth and echoing even in the halls of Mount Olympus. The gods, it seemed, were in for a long and possibly quite hilarious ride. Chapter 2. The Perfect Angle. The initial thrill of seeing his reflection transformed into a surprisingly crisp image had quickly given way to frustration. The blasted thing, his ingenious, albeit crude self-portrait device, only worked perfectly if he remained utterly still. Any movement, however slight, resulted in a blurry, distorted mess, a digital echo of his own fidgeting. This was not the effortless, casually handsome image he envisioned gracing the currently non-existent digital landscape. This was a technological battle of wills, a war between his restless spirit and the unwavering demands of his invention. Initially, the stillness had been a manageable challenge. He'd struck a pose, a classic brooding profile against the backdrop of his beloved pond, holding his breath and suppressing even the slightest twitch. The resulting image, while not perfect, was a marked improvement over the early, slightly smeared attempts. He'd beamed, a smug satisfaction spreading across his features before he carefully saved the masterpiece to his imaginary cloud storage. But the pursuit of perfection, as Narcissus was rapidly discovering, was a demanding mistress. Each subsequent selfie demanded a greater level of stillness, a more rigorous discipline. His initial, somewhat relaxed poses evolved into increasingly awkward and contorted positions. He found himself perched precariously on a mossy rock, legs carefully angled, arms held rigidly at his sides, resembling nothing so much as a rather handsome, albeit inanimate scarecrow. The birds, initially fascinated by his unusual stillness, had long since lost interest. They chirped their disinterest from the branches overhanging the pond, their songs a mocking counterpoint to Narcissus's determined silence. Even the usually placid water seemed to ripple with a subtle current of amusement. His attempts to achieve the perfect angle became an elaborate, almost balletic performance. He'd spend hours meticulously adjusting his position, inching himself this way and that, testing the limits of his physical endurance. He'd discovered that even the slightest shift in his weight, the mere blink of an eye, could ruin the image. His once flowing hair became a source of constant anxiety, each errant strand a potential disaster waiting to happen. He began to braid it meticulously, pinning it tightly against his head, transforming his romantic locks into a stiff helmet-like structure. His wardrobe, too, underwent a transformation. Loose-fitting garments, once a symbol of his effortless charm, were deemed too risky. He traded his flowing robes for a tightly tailored tunic that restricted his movement, practically molding him into the desired still life. He'd even experimented with various fabrics, trying to find the material that would minimize any unintended creases or folds. He'd considered applying some sort of stiffening agent, perhaps a concoction of tree sap and river mud, but ultimately decided against it, fearing the disastrous consequences of a botched experiment. His days were now punctuated by periods of agonizing stillness, broken only by the occasional sigh of frustration or the quiet click of his makeshift camera. He'd learned to hold his breath for increasingly extended periods, his lungs burning, his body aching, all for the sake of a single flawless selfie. The pond, once a symbol of his carefree existence, had become his prison, his own personal digital studio. Echo, that cursed nymph, added her own unique form of commentary, her voice a distorted, repetitive echo of his internal monologue. Perfect, perfect, perfect. She'd drone, her words a glitching, echoing soundtrack to his struggle. Each repetition grated on his nerves, a persistent reminder of the elusive nature of his goal. He started to ignore her. Her words, once a source of mild annoyance, had become simply background noise in the symphony of his self-imposed isolation. The villagers, initially intrigued by his unusual behavior, the prolonged periods of stillness near the pond, the increasingly strange attire, had now simply accepted it as another one of Narcissus's eccentricities. He was, after all, the village eccentric, a young man whose obsession with his reflection was legendary. They gossiped about him, of course, but their whispers were more laced with amusement than concern. He'd become a local legend, the strangely still man of the pond. One particularly scorching afternoon, Narcissus attempted an ambitious group selfie. He'd managed to lure a small flock of sheep near the pond, hoping to capture an idyllic pastoral scene, himself naturally the handsome focal point. The endeavor proved more challenging than he'd anticipated. His attempts to remain completely still while simultaneously herding the sheep proved impossible. The sheep, quite understandably, reacted to his unusual stillness with suspicion. The resulting photos were a blurry mess of anxious sheep and a partially visible Narcissus, looking less like a god and more like a disgruntled shepherd. His obsession, however, showed no signs of waning. The pursuit of the perfect selfie had become an all-consuming passion, a relentless quest for unattainable perfection. He was oblivious to the increasing absurdity of his situation, his vanity clouding his judgment. He was a prisoner of his own creation, trapped in a cycle of stillness, striving for an image that remained perpetually out of reach. The pond, his mirror, his prison reflected not just his image but also the distorted, comical reflection of his own relentless self-obsession. He hadn't just mastered stillness. He'd become its very embodiment, a living monument to the pursuit of the perfectly posed selfie. And somewhere, on Mount Olympus, the gods were probably enjoying a particularly potent vintage of nectar, their amusement echoing the relentless, glitching repetition of Echo's curse. The irony, as always, was not lost on them. Echo's voice, usually a mere irritating hum in the background of Narcissus's self-absorbed world, began to take on a sharper edge. The repetition, once a monotonous drone, became a frantic, almost hysterical echo of his own escalating obsession. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Angle, angle, angle. Light, 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 she shrieked, her voice fractured and distorted, a glitching audio file struggling to keep up with the frantic pace of Narcissus's quest. It wasn't just mirroring his words anymore. It was mirroring his growing desperation, his increasingly frantic attempts to capture that elusive, perfect image. The setting remained unchanged, the familiar backdrop of the still pond, the familiar pose of Narcissus, frozen in his self-imposed rigidity. But the atmosphere had thickened, charged with a palpable tension. The once serene surface of the water now seemed to ripple with a nervous energy, reflecting the turmoil within Narcissus's own obsessed mind. The birds, once amused spectators, had retreated, perhaps sensing the growing intensity of the situation, leaving Narcissus alone with his reflection and the increasingly maddening pronouncements of Echo. His obsession had spiraled into a self-perpetuating cycle. Each successful selfie, a slight improvement on the last, only fueled his desire for an even more flawless image. The bar kept rising, the standard of perfection becoming increasingly unattainable. He'd started experimenting with different filters, mental ones of course, as digital filters were still a twinkle in the eye of future technology. He'd mentally smooth out his skin, lengthen his eyelashes, enhance his already impressive jawline. He'd become a one-man Photoshop project, his mind tirelessly retouching the image before it even reached the crude camera lens. The hours he spent in stillness stretched into days, the days into weeks. He subsisted on minimal amounts of food, brought to him by a concerned and increasingly bewildered villager who whispered about the still man of the pond in hushed tones to other locals in the village square. His movements were now reduced to the bare minimum, his body growing stiff, his muscles atrophied from the endless hours of immobility. He'd become a statue of self-absorption, a living monument to the futility of chasing an impossible ideal. Echo's commentary intensified, reflecting the frantic rhythm of his obsession. Pose, pose, pose. Smile, smile, smile. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Her voice was now a relentless barrage, a digital storm of repeated phrases crashing against his ears. It was no longer a mere echo. It was an overwhelming cacophony, a constant reminder of his failure to achieve that elusive goal. He started to hallucinate, blurring the lines between reality and the filtered images he conjured in his mind. His reflection became less a reflection and more a constantly shifting, ever-evolving ideal, always just out of reach. His obsession wasn't confined to his physical appearance anymore. It had seeped into every aspect of his life, warping his perception of reality. He'd started to curate his thoughts, crafting internal monologues worthy of posting, deleting any perceived flaws or imperfections. He'd practice his responses to imaginary comments, preparing witty retorts to unseen critics. He'd even started to envision elaborate captions for his non-existent posts, carefully crafting each word to maximize impact, to garner the maximum number of imaginary likes and comments. The once clear water of the pond had become a distorted lens, reflecting back a warped version of himself. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now dull and vacant, focused solely on his reflection. His skin, once smooth and healthy, had taken on a pallid, almost ghostly hue, the result of prolonged exposure to the elements and lack of proper nourishment. His hair, once a symbol of his youthful charm, was now matted and unkempt, a testament to his utter neglect of his physical well-being. He'd become a caricature of himself, a parody of the idealized image he so desperately sought to capture. Echo's voice grew even more distorted, fractured into a series of broken phrases, a digital representation of a mind pushed to its limits. Selfie, selfie, selfie. Vanity, vanity, vanity. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Her words were now less a commentary and more a reflection of the growing madness that consumed Narcissus, a digital echo chamber of his own self-destruction. The repetition wasn't just annoying, it was terrifying. It was a relentless, inescapable soundtrack to his descent into obsession. It was the soundtrack to his slow, self-imposed demise. The gods on Mount Olympus watched the spectacle unfold with a mixture of amusement and pity. Their nectar flowed freely, their laughter echoing the repetitive cries of Echo, creating a bizarre symphony of cosmic mockery. They debated whether to intervene, to somehow snap Narcissus out of his self-imposed trance. But the sheer absurdity of the situation, the utter comicality of his self-obsession, held them captive in their own amusement. They were, after all, gods. They'd seen it all before. And yet, this particular spectacle, this collision of ancient mythology and modern vanity, was something truly unique. It was something strangely captivating, something that even the gods couldn't quite tear themselves away from. And so, the drama continued to unfold. Narcissus's endless quest for the perfect selfie, a testament to the boundless capacity for self-delusion, a darkly comedic echo of human vanity playing out against the timeless backdrop of the mythological world. The villagers, meanwhile, had begun to organize a village-wide selfie competition, ironically inspired by Narcissus's obsessive behavior. They called it the Narcissus Challenge, the winner to receive the coveted title of most photogenic villager and a lifetime supply of locally grown figs. Narcissus, lost in his own private hell of pixels and perfection, remained oblivious to the irony, his world a distorted reflection of his own self-absorbed vision. His pursuit of the perfect angle continued, a never-ending quest fueled by an insatiable hunger for validation, a hunger that would ultimately consume him, leaving behind only a legend and a particularly stubborn glitching echo. The perfect angle, of course, remained stubbornly out of reach, a cruel joke played on the man who believed himself to be the epitome of perfection. The joke, of course, was on him, and the gods, sipping their nectar, found it utterly hilarious. The wind, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, whispered secrets through the reeds that fringed the pond. These secrets, however, weren't the usual rustling gossip of the forest. They carried the faint, almost imperceptible hum of burgeoning fame. Narcissus, oblivious to the subtle shifts in the atmospheric pressure, remained frozen in his pose, a monument to self-obsession sculpted from flesh and bone. His camera, a crude invention fueled by desperate ambition, remained pointed steadfastly at his reflection, capturing an image that was, in its stillness, strangely captivating. Word of the still man of the pond, as he was now known, had spread beyond the village limits. Initially, it had been hushed whispers, tales exchanged between villagers over steaming mugs of goat's milk. But whispers, like ripples in a pond, spread outwards, carrying their narratives far and wide. The news reached the neighboring settlements, traveling on the backs of gossiping merchants and the nimble feet of curious children. It infiltrated the taverns, becoming the subject of spirited debates and wagering competitions. Was he a god? A cursed creature? A hermit possessed by some strange malady? The mystery, compounded by the almost mythical quality of his self-portraits, fueled a growing curiosity. The first followers arrived subtly at first. A lone shepherd, drawn by the strange stillness of the man by the pond, cautiously approached, his eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. He observed Narcissus for a long time, noting the almost unnatural perfection of his pose, the unwavering gaze fixed upon his own reflection. He saw the strange contraption pointed at the water, a primitive device that seemed to capture the very essence of Narcissus's self-obsession. He returned to the village, his tale laced with awe and a hint of unease, a tale that sparked further curiosity and the inevitable pilgrimage to witness the phenomenon firsthand. Soon a trickle of people became a steady stream. Farmers, artisans, and even a few skeptical philosophers made the journey, drawn by the reports of the perfect selfies. They came to observe, to analyze, to judge. Each viewer, in their own way, became a silent witness to Narcissus's self-imposed imprisonment, a testament to his unwavering dedication to the pursuit of the impossible ideal. They were the first of Narcissus's followers, unwitting participants in a bizarre performance art piece fueled by vanity and technology. Each silently contributed to the growing legend of the still man, their presence a silent testament to his unintended influence. The setting around the pond slowly transformed, mirroring the growing attention Narcissus inadvertently attracted. The serene seclusion was replaced by a subtle buzz of activity. The once quiet path leading to the pond became a well-trodden track, worn smooth by the feet of curious onlookers. The reeds swayed rhythmically, as if bowing to the newfound celebrity status of their resident. Even the birds seemed to sense the change, their songs becoming more insistent, their movements more agitated, as if commenting on the unfolding drama. The villagers, initially baffled by Narcissus's behavior, found themselves strangely drawn into his orbit. His obsession, so utterly self-absorbed, had paradoxically created a unique form of entertainment, a bizarre spectacle that transcended the mundane. They brought him food, though most remained at a distance, observing his every movement, or rather, his lack thereof. Their hushed conversations, once filled with concern, now contained a mixture of morbid fascination and grudging admiration. He was a spectacle, an anomaly, a living embodiment of their own deepest insecurities and desires. His stillness, initially a source of discomfort, began to transform into a symbol of dedication, albeit a dedication to an unsettling ideal. Echo, meanwhile, continued her relentless commentary, her voice a fractured soundtrack to Narcissus's fame. Her echoes now bounced off the increased number of onlookers, her fractured repetitions amplified by the growing crowd, reflecting their own growing curiosity and fascination. "Perfect! Perfect! Perfect!" she shrieked, her voice a cacophony that blended with the murmur of the growing audience. "Still, still, still? Angle, angle, angle." She was the unwilling narrator of this bizarre modern myth, her voice a distorted reflection of the collective obsession Narcissus had unwittingly cultivated. The gods on Olympus, their initial amusement now tinged with a hint of concern, observed this burgeoning phenomenon with a mixture of bewilderment and amusement. They debated the implications of this unexpected turn of events, this accidental collision of ancient mythology and modern self-promotion. Had they unintentionally created a new archetype, a modern god of self-obsession, a new influencer to rival the most powerful of mortals? The implications were both intriguing and unsettling. Their laughter, once a mere accompaniment to the situation, now carried a hint of underlying anxiety. The perfectly crafted image, however, continued to captivate the onlookers, a testament to the power of the perfect angle, a perfect angle that Narcissus himself couldn't quite achieve. Narcissus, of course, remained blissfully unaware of his newfound following. His world remained confined to the reflection in the pond, a reflection that seemed to mock his every effort, a cruel mirage always just out of reach. He continued his pursuit of the perfect angle, oblivious to the ripple effect of his obsession, the subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure around the pond, and the growing number of witnesses to his self-imposed exile. His vanity, so intensely focused on his own image, blinded him to the wider audience he inadvertently cultivated. His followers, captivated by his strange, motionless beauty, continued to grow, unwittingly contributing to the legend of the still man, the man who sought the perfect angle, the perfect selfie, in an era that hadn't even begun to comprehend the concept of likes and followers. The stage was set, the audience assembled, and the protagonist remained utterly oblivious, a silent, still testament to the darker side of self-obsession. The perfect angle remained elusive. The perfect storm of fame and obsession was brewing. The air on Mount Olympus crackled with an energy far more potent than Zeus's usual thunderbolts. It wasn't the rumble of impending storms, but the static hum of a heated debate, a celestial disagreement echoing the growing unrest in the mortal realm below. The cause? Narcissus, the still man of the pond, and his inexplicable rise to, well, something. Influence? Infamy? The gods themselves were unsure. Hera, ever the pragmatist, tapped a perfectly manicured fingernail against the armrest of her throne. "He's wasting away, Zeus," she stated, her voice laced with a familiar dryness. Obsessed with his reflection, neglecting even the most basic necessities. Isn't that sufficient punishment? Zeus, however, stroked his beard thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the shimmering image of Narcissus projected onto a cloud conveniently shaped like a giant smartphone screen. He's captivating, Hera, he admitted, a rare flicker of uncertainty in his usually authoritative tone. His dedication, however misguided, is impressive. Think of the potential. He's inadvertently created a following, a devoted audience, without lifting a finger beyond posing. Ares, ever the warrior, slammed his fist on the table, causing several lesser deities to jump. Captivating? Impressive? He's a vain, self-absorbed fool. He deserves a good thrashing, a lesson in humility, perhaps a few weeks as a garden gnome. His suggestion was met with a chorus of disapproving murmurs. Even Hades, usually a proponent of extreme measures, looked mildly horrified. Athena, ever the strategist, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with intellectual curiosity. His influence, while unintended, is undeniable. He's mastered the art of the perfect angle, a skill many mortals would kill for. Perhaps we could harness this talent. Imagine the possibilities. A divinely inspired influencer promoting peace, wisdom, maybe even a new line of Olympus-branded merchandise. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled gods. The idea of branded merchandise was both revolutionary and terrifying. Hermes, ever the messenger, flitted between the warring factions, his wings blurring in a chaotic dance of diplomacy. "My dear colleagues," he chirped, attempting to steer the conversation towards some semblance of order. "We must consider the implications of divine intervention. If we punish him, we risk alienating his followers, a potentially powerful group if we don't handle this strategically. If we embrace him, well, that opens a whole new can of nectar." Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, chimed in, her voice soft but firm. "His obsession is extreme, yes, but it's also a reflection of our own times. Mortals are obsessed with appearances, with crafting perfect images to present to the world. Narcissus is merely the most extreme example. Perhaps we should use this opportunity to teach them a lesson about balance, about the importance of inner beauty over outward perfection. We could stage an intervention, a divine social media campaign on the importance of self-acceptance. Apollo, ever the artist, took a different approach. Consider his camera, a primitive device, yet incredibly effective. It's a testament to human ingenuity, a reflection of our constant drive for innovation. We could inspire him to create something truly magnificent, something that benefits mortals and elevates the human spirit, a divine collaboration of sorts. Think of the artistic potential, a masterpiece sculpted from vanity and technology. Dionysus, ever the party animal, proposed a different solution altogether. "Let's throw a huge party." "A cosmic rave. We'll invite Narcissus, his followers, and everyone else. A celebration of life, of self-acceptance, a lesson in moderation and joy delivered through the medium of ecstatic dancing and copious amounts of ambrosia. We could even get the muses to spin some killer beats." His suggestion was met with a mixture of raised eyebrows and reluctant smiles. Even the sternest Olympians found themselves slightly swayed by the allure of a good party. The debate raged on for hours, a tempest of divine opinions swirling around the image of Narcissus, the perfectly still man. The gods, immortal beings accustomed to wielding unimaginable power, found themselves grappling with the complexities of modern social media, the unpredictable nature of viral fame, and the unforeseen consequences of their own interventions in the mortal realm. The whispers of mortals' growing obsession with the perfect angle echoed in the celestial halls, a stark reminder of the power of illusion and the ever-present search for validation. They were facing a challenge that even their divine power couldn't fully predict or control. The question remained: was Narcissus a cautionary tale, a punishment waiting to happen, or a surprisingly potent tool of influence waiting to be strategically deployed? The answer, it seemed, remained as elusive as the perfect selfie. The gods for once were genuinely stumped. They found themselves trapped in a social media dilemma, as modern as the latest mortal hashtag, but with far more significant ramifications for the entire cosmos. The fate of Narcissus, and perhaps the future of Olympus itself, hung precariously in the balance. The debate continued, a celestial echo of the anxieties and aspirations of the mortal world they so casually governed. The perfectly still image on the cloud screen seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final verdict. The gods for once were unsure of themselves, their usual confidence faltering in the face of this strange new era. The pond, once a shimmering jewel reflecting the azure sky, now seemed to mock Narcissus's gaunt frame. His reflection, still undeniably handsome, was framed by the increasingly hollowed contours of his face, the sharp angles of his cheekbones accentuated by a pallor that bordered on translucent. He hadn't eaten in days, not properly anyway. A few berries, snatched impulsively between self-portrait sessions, were the extent of his sustenance. Sleep was a luxury he could no longer afford, each fleeting moment of unconsciousness a potential disruption to his meticulously crafted compositions. His once vibrant hair, the color of spun gold, was now dull and lifeless, clinging limply to his temples. His eyes, previously sparkling with an almost arrogant confidence, were now shadowed and sunken, reflecting a weariness that belied his youth. The vibrant energy that had initially captivated the gods seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a feverish intensity that was both disturbing and strangely compelling. He adjusted his pose a fraction of an inch to the left, striving for that elusive, perfect angle. The digital representation of his reflection on the camera, a marvel of inadvertently created technology, was still flawlessly rendered, an ethereal masterpiece of flawless skin and sculpted features. The villagers, peering from a distance, whispered among themselves, their awe mixed with a growing unease. They brought offerings of food, of water, of the finest silks, leaving them at the edge of the pond, gifts that went unheeded, untouched, overshadowed by the allure of his self-generated perfection. Echo, her voice a fractured, glitching symphony of repetition, continued her commentary, a relentless chorus echoing Narcissus's own pronouncements. Perfect, 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 she repeated, her sound like a broken record, adding another layer of unnerving repetition to the already unsettling scene. Her form flickered in and out of existence, a shimmering, spectral presence that only Narcissus seemed oblivious to, her increasingly desperate attempts to break through his self-imposed isolation falling on deaf ears, or perhaps a mind that preferred the comforting silence of self-obsession. The pristine beauty of the self-portraits contrasted starkly with the decaying reality of their creator. Each image was a meticulous composition, painstakingly achieved through hours of unwavering stillness, each pose more refined, more polished than the last. Yet, the man behind the image was slowly withering, a testament to the destructive power of unchecked self-obsession. His once strong body, toned and youthful, was now frail, his muscles atrophied from neglect, his skin stretched taut over jutting bones. His reflection, trapped in the still waters of the pond, showed him a beauty that was both real and an illusion simultaneously, while he himself was withering and fading. He could not reconcile the two. He shifted again, a subtle adjustment of his lips, the slightest tilt of his chin. The image updated, flawless, even more compelling than before. His own deterioration remained invisible to him, not that he would have acknowledged it if it had been. He was too consumed by the pursuit of perfection, a perfection that only existed within the confines of his self-created digital world. a self-created and self-destructive illusion. The gods, observing from Mount Olympus, watched with a mixture of amusement and apprehension. Zeus, still fascinated by Narcissus's unintended influence, couldn't help but marvel at the lengths to which mortals would go for validation, for the ephemeral validation of a perfect image. Hera, however, felt a growing sense of unease. The scale of Narcissus's self-absorption was starting to alarm her. This wasn't just vanity, it was self-annihilation masquerading as self-expression. This wasn't just about vanity anymore, but self-destruction presented as self-expression. Athena, ever practical, suggested an intervention, a carefully planned campaign to promote self-acceptance and the beauty of imperfection. But her plans were constantly thwarted by Narcissus's unwavering focus on his reflection. He couldn't see their messages, couldn't hear their warnings, drowned out by the siren song of self-adulation. A few mortals attempted to approach him, to offer assistance, but their words were lost, drowned in the relentless echo of his own praise. His self-absorption had created a mental soundproof chamber. Apollo, intrigued by the technical marvel of the camera, envisioned it as a tool for creativity, a device that could be used for good, for inspiring art and beauty. He fantasized about a collaboration, about harnessing Narcissus's obsessive attention to detail for the creation of something truly extraordinary. But the artist in him was frustrated by the subject's inability to connect with anything but his reflection. Hermes tried to reason with him, to gently steer him towards a healthier path, to remind him of the joys of life beyond the pond. But his words were met with a blank stare, an expression devoid of understanding or empathy. Narcissus had lost all connection with the world, adrift in a sea of self-obsession, surrounded by a constant echo that only reinforced his delusions of grandeur. Even Dionysus, ever the advocate for unrestrained joy, seemed subdued by Narcissus's relentless self-absorption. The celebration he'd proposed now seemed pointless, even cruel, a potential distraction from an obsession that was slowly killing its subject. The gods, in their own way, were beginning to mirror the concern shown by the village inhabitants. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Narcissus's deterioration continued, his body frail, his spirit increasingly brittle. The villagers, once awed by his apparent perfection, now watched with a mixture of pity and fear. They recognized the creeping shadow of obsession, a darkness that threatened to engulf not just Narcissus, but also their small, once peaceful community. The situation was not only a tragedy, but a warning, a chilling display of what happens when self-love metastasizes into a full-blown, life-threatening addiction. The village elders started to whisper about the need for divine intervention, not to save him, but to contain the growing negativity emanating from his desperate pursuit of an unattainable ideal. The once crystal-clear waters of the pond began to grow murky, mirroring the state of Narcissus's mind. Algae grew along the edges of the pond, and the clear reflections became cloudy, a reflection of Narcissus's deteriorating state of mind. The perfect angle became impossible to achieve as the image became muddied and distorted, as if foreshadowing his own fate. But he continued to try, his obsession relentless, his grip on reality slipping with each passing day. His obsession remained undiminished, a constant burning fire that consumed him from the inside. The gods, for once, were at a loss. They had dealt with titans, monsters, and even the occasional mischievous god, but they were unprepared for the destructive power of unchecked vanity amplified by modern technology. His perfection would fade, no matter the number of posed images. Chapter 3. The Algorithmic Curse. The realization dawned on Narcissus gradually, like the slow creep of twilight. It wasn't just about the stillness. the unwavering pose that held his reflection captive in the pond's glassy surface. There was something more, a subtle manipulation he could exert over his image, a power that transcended mere stillness. He noticed how a strategically placed leaf, drifting lazily across the surface, cast a dappled shadow, softening the harsh lines of his jaw, creating a romantic, almost ethereal aura. The effect was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He experimented, holding his breath as he watched a water droplet cling to a lily pad, its tiny lens distorting his reflection, creating a soft focus effect that blurred minor imperfections and heightened the already striking intensity of his gaze. This was revelation. It wasn't just about capturing the perfect image, it was about crafting the perfect image. The pond, once merely a mirror reflecting a single immutable truth, had transformed into a malleable canvas, a virtual studio where Narcissus could sculpt his own digital persona. He began to experiment with the natural elements, using the changing light, the swaying reeds, the gentle ripples to sculpt his digital self. A falling leaf became a natural vignette, a delicate frame that softened the edges of the picture and heightened his overall artistic appeal. Each passing cloud became a variable lighting source, helping shape and highlight his features, shaping the ultimate masterpiece. He became acutely aware of the changing light, the positioning of the sun, and the play of shadows across his face. Sunrise and sunset became his prime times, the golden light illuminating his features with a divine glow that his camera readily replicated. The process became almost ritualistic. He would spend hours arranging leaves, coaxing droplets into position, using the reeds as natural filters to sculpt his digital self to perfection. The villagers, initially bewildered, grew increasingly fascinated by this strange new behavior, watching from a distance as Narcissus transformed the pond's edge into a sophisticated, if entirely organic, photo studio. His meticulous preparations became legendary in the village, blurring the line between mythology and a cutting-edge artistic process. The technique wasn't always successful. Sometimes a gust of wind would disrupt his meticulously placed leaves, scattering his carefully crafted composition. Sometimes a careless movement would ripple the water's surface, distorting his reflection beyond repair. The frustrating glitches and the unexpected failures became part of the process. Each accidental flaw added a new dimension to the art of his self-portraiture, showing that even in the digital world, the perfect image was elusive, requiring patience and attention to detail. The flaws, once seen as a problem, became integral to the creation of his aesthetic, a reminder that even in the digital realm, perfection was an illusion. The glitches in Echo's voice began to find a strange parallel in the glitches of his images. Her fractured repetitions mirrored the sometimes imperfect, sometimes startlingly beautiful results of his experiments. He started incorporating more sophisticated techniques. He discovered that by tilting his head at a particular angle, he could subtly alter the shape of his face, making his jawline sharper, his cheekbones more prominent. He learned to use the reflections of the sky, the movement of the clouds, to create dynamic, ever-changing backdrops. The pond, once a simple reflection, became a stage, the setting for a self-directed performance of unparalleled vanity. His camera, now fully integrated into his artistic process, was no longer just a mere tool, but an extension of himself, his creative partner in the performance of his self. His pursuit of the perfect selfie pushed the boundaries of technology itself. It was the first primitive form of image editing, a form of artistry that wouldn't be replicated in its ingenious, organic simplicity for millennia. His selfies began to develop a unique aesthetic. They weren't just portraits. They were elaborate compositions, carefully constructed images that reflected not only Narcissus's physical beauty, but also his growing mastery of his newfound art form. The villagers observed, mesmerized, as he transformed the natural world around him into an extension of his artistic vision. They whispered about his strange artistry, of the perfection he was able to achieve through the simple manipulation of nature. They were unaware that what they saw was far from perfect. It was the chaotic byproduct of a mind in free fall. As Narcissus's skills increased, so did his obsession. He spent even more time at the pond, neglecting food, sleep, and social interaction, his world narrowing to the ever-changing reflections in the water. Echo's glitching voice continued to commentate on his vanity, an increasingly frantic counterpoint to his self-congratulatory pronouncements. He couldn't hear her, at least not consciously, his focus consumed by the challenge of achieving the perfect image. The gods watching from Olympus were both amused and concerned. Zeus, ever the showman, appreciated the unintentional artistry of Narcissus's creations, the beauty of self-obsession given form. Hera, however, worried about the increasing isolation and self-destruction inherent in his obsession. Athena attempted to devise a strategy for intervention, but every attempt was thwarted by Narcissus's impenetrable focus. Apollo, however, saw the potential for true artistry in Narcissus's methods. He saw beyond the vanity, recognizing the nascent power of image manipulation, the potential to express beauty and emotion through carefully constructed visual narratives. He considered reaching out, trying to collaborate, but he could tell that it would be a fool's errand. The man was lost in the digital fog of his self-constructed reality. Hermes, ever the pragmatist, tried to offer more tangible forms of advice, a more straightforward path to self-acceptance and contentment. But Narcissus was too far gone. The siren song of perfection drowned out any attempt at reason. Even Dionysus, usually a champion of unrestrained revelry, found himself pondering the emptiness behind such self-absorbed artistry, the profound desolation hidden beneath the surface of an obsession. The perfection Narcissus craved was an illusion, a fleeting moment trapped in the still waters of the pond, an image bound to decay like the rest of us. The villagers, meanwhile, started to leave offerings of leaves and droplets, their gifts mirroring the increasingly bizarre nature of Narcissus's artistic process. They began to understand his methodology, his creative process, but not his self-destructive tendencies. They were stuck in the spectator role, both fascinated and repelled by his creation. The cycle continued, Narcissus, lost in his reflection, desperately pursuing perfection through the manipulation of natural filters. The pond, transforming from a serene landscape into a virtual studio. Echo, her voice a fractured chorus echoing the artist's self-love, and the gods observing the strange spectacle with a mixture of amusement, concern, and profound bewilderment. The irony was not lost on them. A man trapped by his obsession with self-image, creating the very tools that would eventually lead to the democratization of image manipulation, the foundation of a technological and cultural revolution he would never comprehend. He was, in a very real way, the reluctant father of modern image editing. He continued oblivious, lost in the relentless pursuit of an illusion, trapped in his own digital echo chamber. The digital world, like a reflection, reflected the emptiness of his soul, and his fate seemed to be irrevocably sealed. The first sign was subtle, a barely perceptible shimmer in the otherwise flawless reflection. A faint, almost imperceptible pixelation, like a brief flicker on an old television screen, momentarily disrupting the perfect smoothness of his image. Narcissus, initially irritated by the imperfection, dismissed it as a trick of the light, a momentary lapse in the otherwise unwavering perfection of his self-portrait. He adjusted his position, rearranged a leaf, coaxed a droplet into a more advantageous position, but the shimmer persisted. It was then he noticed that Echo's voice, always a fractured echo of his own pronouncements, seemed to be directly impacting his Selfie. When she repeated his boasts of beauty, a wave of pixelated static would momentarily engulf his reflection, making his features blur and dissolve into a chaotic mess of digital noise. When she mocked his vanity, thin, almost invisible digital cracks spiderwebbed across his image, threatening to shatter the illusion of perfection. The glitches became more pronounced, more frequent. A slight distortion in his jawline whenever Echo repeated his self-congratulatory remarks. A momentary elongation of his neck when she ironically echoed his claims of grace. His perfect selfies, once static and unyielding, now pulsed with a disconcerting life of their own, reflecting the instability of Echo's cursed pronouncements. The pond, once a serene mirror, now reacted dynamically to her voice, its surface rippling not merely with natural movement, but also with the intensity of Echo's commentary. The ripples followed the cadence of her voice, echoing the very frustrations of her curse. It was a chilling demonstration of the interconnectedness between the physical and the digital, between the ancient curse and the nascent technology. Narcissus, however, remained oblivious to the deeper meaning. He attributed the glitches to technical difficulties, a flaw in his organic camera. He spent hours attempting to refine his technique, seeking to eliminate the disruptions, to restore the flawless perfection of his digital self. His obsession intensified, transforming from simple vanity to a desperate struggle against the increasingly erratic behavior of his camera, a struggle he was doomed to lose. He tried everything he could imagine. He experimented with different angles, different lighting conditions, different arrangements of natural filters. He even tried holding his breath for longer periods, attempting to achieve a state of absolute stillness that would appease the disruptive force affecting his work. But the glitches remained. They mirrored the chaos of Echo's voice, the disjointed nature of her reality, now woven into the fabric of his digital creations. As his obsession grew, so did the severity of the glitches. Echo's presence became more pronounced, her influence more intrusive. His selfies began to warp and distort in unpredictable ways, his features contorting into grotesque parodies of their former perfection. Sometimes his reflection would momentarily disappear, replaced by a chaotic swirl of digital noise, a ghostly representation of Echo's disembodied form. At other times, his face would be overlaid with fragmented repetitions of his own words, a constant reminder of his self-absorption. The digital chaos threatened to consume him, mirroring the curse he was inflicting upon himself. The villagers, observing from afar, were both fascinated and horrified. They witnessed the transformation of Narcissus's creations, the gradual disintegration of his perfect selfies into chaotic bursts of digital noise. The glitches, far from being mere technical failures, seemed to express a deep emotional truth, reflecting the flaws and inconsistencies inherent in Narcissus's self-perception. The pond itself seemed to be aware of the curse, almost mirroring the chaos of Narcissus's emotional state. The gods on Olympus followed the unfolding drama with a mixture of amusement and concern. Zeus, ever the pragmatist, saw the potential for a new form of entertainment, a modern-day spectacle to match the ancient tragedies. Hera, however, worried about the potential for lasting damage, the potential for narcissistic obsession to metastasize into something genuinely destructive. Athena, ever the strategist, pondered the possibility of intervention, yet any action she conceived seemed to be thwarted by the very nature of Narcissus's obsessive, technologically driven self-destruction. Apollo, however, saw the situation differently. He viewed Narcissus's struggle not as a tragedy, but as a twisted, self-inflicted form of artistic expression. He saw the glitches, the distortions, the chaotic noise, not as failures, but as unique stylistic elements, a raw, honest expression of the artist's inner turmoil. The glitches, the imperfections, were integral to the image, showing a side of Narcissus that would otherwise be hidden behind the meticulously crafted facade of his self-portraits. He considered intervening, guiding Narcissus's self-destructive tendencies towards a more constructive, even artistic expression of the emotions fueling his obsession. But even Apollo found it a challenge to communicate with a man so lost in his digital echo chamber. The gods on Olympus debated the situation, the humor and the severity of it all in equal measure. They were observing not just the fate of a vain young man, but also the birth of a new technological age, an age where self-expression could be crafted, manipulated, and ultimately distorted to serve the whims of the individual. Narcissus, with his organic camera, was unconsciously creating a digital world that would eventually reflect the deepest flaws and fantasies of humanity. He was the architect of his own digital prison, his own algorithmic curse. His creations, once flawless, now reflected Echo's curse, a digital ghost interwoven into his work. Each attempt to capture perfection was met with a counterpoint of glitches, reflecting the impossibility of escaping his own fragmented reality. The glitches didn't just affect Narcissus's images. They began to seep into the very fabric of his reality. The leaves he meticulously arranged began to shift and rearrange themselves, as if guided by an unseen hand. The droplets of water seemed to dance and shimmer with an independent life of their own, obscuring his reflection and disorganizing his compositions. The ripples in the water mirrored the fragmented nature of Echo's voice, creating a chaotic, almost hostile environment. The pond, once his personal studio, was now transforming into a hostile reflection of his inner turmoil. Echo's digital ghost, once a mere disruptive element, was now fully integrated into Narcissus's technological landscape. She wasn't just commenting on his actions, she was actively shaping them, her fragmented voice manifesting as glitches, distortions, and interruptions in his digital creations. She became a part of his digital world, a permanent reminder of the consequences of unchecked vanity and self-obsession. Her curse had transcended the physical realm and entered the digital sphere, a haunting testament to the inescapable nature of actions and their repercussions. His attempt to control his image had ultimately led to the loss of control over his technological reflection. The digital world, far from being a sanctuary of self-perfection, was turning into a terrifying echo chamber of Echo's curse. Narcissus's obsession continued, fueled by a desperate need to overcome the technical challenges posed by Echo's digital interference. The irony was palpable. His attempt to create a perfect digital representation of himself was leading to his complete digital disintegration, a testament to the folly of his self-absorbed quest for perfection. His technological creations, mirroring his psychological state, were crumbling under the weight of his own vanity. The gods watched, both amused and concerned, as Narcissus became increasingly isolated, consumed by his digital struggle, lost in the algorithmic curse that was both his creation and his destruction. The perfection he sought was a mirage, an illusion constantly obscured by the digital ghost of Echo, haunting his technological mirror and reflecting the inevitable consequences of unchecked narcissism. His digital echo chamber was simultaneously his masterpiece and his prison. The initial glitches, initially dismissed as mere technical flaws, soon became a strangely compelling aspect of Narcissus's digital self-portraits. His followers, A burgeoning online community drawn to his initially flawless images began to find a perverse charm in the imperfections. The warping features, the sudden bursts of digital noise, the fleeting disappearances, these became his signature, his unique brand. The more erratic his selfies became, the more captivated his audience grew. It was a strange paradox. The pursuit of perfection had inadvertently led to the creation of an imperfect, yet strangely alluring digital persona. Word of Narcissus's glitching selfies spread like wildfire, carried on the whispers of the wind and the rapid-fire updates of the nascent social media network, a fledgling system of interconnected messages that the gods themselves were beginning to observe with a mixture of amusement and bewilderment. His initial audience, primarily the villagers initially horrified by his strange obsession, expanded to include nymphs, satyrs, and even a few curious gods who, masked by anonymity, lurked among the comments. The comments ranged from awe to ridicule, with the most common being, "How does he do that?" Narcissus, completely unaware of the irony, attributed his growing popularity to his mastery of his organic camera. He saw the glitches not as flaws, but as artistic choices, unique stylistic elements that set him apart from the crowd. He began to actively cultivate the imperfections, manipulating his positions and surroundings to enhance the glitches, pushing the boundaries of his digital self-expression. He treated the distortions as intentional effects, a deliberate attempt to challenge the very notion of digital perfection. His conscious attempts at manipulation caused even more intense and unusual glitches, making them seem more mysterious and compelling. His followers, meanwhile, were eagerly awaiting his next post. Each new image was an event, a digital spectacle anticipated with breathless excitement. They analyzed each pixel, each glitch, each distortion, searching for clues, interpreting the imperfections as hidden messages, as glimpses into the enigmatic soul of the artist. Fan theories spread from claims of advanced digital trickery to whispers of ancient curses. The glitches and distortions became a language of their own, a complex communication between Narcissus and his digital devotees. He had inadvertently created a system of digital artistry that defied logic and expectation, an unexpected path to online infamy that was fueled by technology, enhanced by a curse, and made iconic by his obliviousness. The growing number of followers was not merely a virtual phenomenon. Narcissus's influence spread into the physical world. People began to emulate his style, attempting to replicate his glitching selfies, using various crude devices fashioned from polished stones and reflective surfaces. This generated new forms of art, mirroring his work, albeit with less advanced and often comical results. Their efforts reflected the growing desire for self-expression, albeit a warped and derivative expression. The obsession with Narcissus wasn't merely about replicating his glitching selfies. It was about replicating his perceived detachment from reality. The villagers began meticulously curating their own images, spending hours perfecting angles, lighting, and composition in their attempts to create the perfect online persona, mirroring Narcissus's obsessive attention to detail. They started to neglect their real lives, mirroring Narcissus's detachment from reality. Farms were left unattended. Herd animals went astray. Daily routines were abandoned in pursuit of that elusive, perfect digital representation of themselves. The gods observed this contagion with a mixture of amusement and concern. Zeus found the situation hilarious, a modern-day spectacle worthy of his most celebrated comedic performances. Hera, however, worried that the pursuit of digital perfection was leading to the neglect of physical realities. Athena, recognizing the potential for widespread social chaos, contemplated intervention, considering strategies to halt this escalating digital obsession. Apollo, meanwhile, saw it as a twisted social experiment on an unprecedented scale, an intriguing exploration of human nature pushed to its extreme. The situation was neither simple nor easily understood. The spread of Narcissus's influence wasn't limited to the immediate vicinity of the pond. News of his glitching selfies traveled far and wide, carried by gossiping winds and the rapidly expanding network of messaging devices, a digital ripple effect emanating from the center of his obsession. Even the nymphs, initially charmed by Narcissus's good looks, at least before the glitches began to dominate his image, started to participate, documenting his decline with their own creative, albeit often flawed, digital imagery. These images became almost a running commentary on his ongoing decline into digital obscurity. The gods, ever watchful, observed this ripple effect with growing concern. The spread of narcissistic obsession, amplified by burgeoning digital technologies, had the potential to disrupt the delicate balance of nature itself. It was no longer a simple case of a vain young man. It was the rise of a new phenomenon, the first social media influencer, unwittingly wielding a power far beyond his comprehension. His pursuit of the perfect selfie had inadvertently created a global trend, a contagion that threatened to engulf society in a relentless quest for an unattainable digital perfection. The pond, once a quiet sanctuary reflecting only Narcissus's image, became a hub of activity filled with people striving for their own digital immortality. The water became restless, mirroring the chaotic energy of the growing online community, the endless stream of images and updates, creating a swirling vortex of pixels and emotions. It became a digital melting pot as the world found a way to participate in the digital obsession that Narcissus had inadvertently generated. The gods, viewing the growing chaos, realized that this was not just a personal failing, but a reflection of something deeper, something ingrained in human nature. Narcissus, oblivious to the chaos he'd unleashed, continued his pursuit of the perfect selfie, a pursuit that was increasingly hampered by the very glitches that had made him famous. He was caught in a feedback loop, his digital self a reflection of his growing despair, the digital noise mirroring the internal turmoil that he refused to acknowledge. His obsession had transformed from self-admiration into self-destruction, a race to capture the unattainable perfection that was, ironically, fueled by imperfection itself. He had created an art form out of his own descent, unaware that this decline was also his rise as an influencer, a digital Icarus trapped in the algorithmic web of his own making. His popularity grew, feeding into his obsession, creating a vicious cycle of self-destruction that had become impossible to break. The irony was bitter. Narcissus's fame was built on his imperfections, the very flaws he'd initially sought to eliminate. His digital legacy was born out of failure, a testament to the chaotic beauty of human imperfection. His growing influence, however, cast a long shadow, spreading his narcissistic obsession to his followers, creating a digital epidemic of self-obsession. The world was becoming his reflection, mirroring his own vanity and self-destruction. The algorithmic curse had spread, extending beyond the pond, encompassing the entire world, weaving its way into the hearts and minds of everyone connected to the burgeoning network, transforming humanity's reflection into a warped mirror of its own deepest flaws. His downfall was his rise, his curse, his blessing, and his perfection, his inevitable undoing. The gods watched, pondering the implications of this new form of digital divinity, wondering how to intervene in a world where even a curse could be a source of profound influence. The situation had reached a critical mass. The digital ripple effect, emanating from Narcissus's pond had spread far beyond the valley, reaching even the Olympian heights. The gods, initially amused spectators, now found themselves facing a crisis of epic proportions. The once clear waters of the pond, now churning with the digital echoes of 1,000 self-obsessed souls, mirrored the turmoil brewing in the heavens. Zeus, initially finding the whole affair uproariously funny, began to see the potential for widespread chaos. Hera, ever the pragmatist, worried about the practical consequences, the neglected farms, the straying herds, the general societal breakdown brought on by the universal pursuit of the perfect digital self. Apollo, ever the detached observer, found himself strangely fascinated by the experiment unfolding before his eyes. He saw in Narcissus's self-obsession a grotesque reflection of humanity's inherent vanity, a societal flaw magnified and distorted by the lens of new technology. He even found a certain morbid beauty in the self-destruction that Narcissus's algorithmic curse had wrought. Athena, however, was growing increasingly impatient. She'd devised countless strategies, from subtle manipulations of the digital network to outright divine interventions, but each had been met with a frustrating lack of efficacy. The algorithmic curse seemed to possess a life of its own, defying even the power of the gods. It was Hermes, the mischievous messenger god, who finally broke the stalemate. Known for his pragmatism and his uncanny ability to navigate the complexities of the human world, Hermes proposed a daring plan. He argued that subtle interventions were pointless. A dramatic, highly visible intervention was necessary to shake Narcissus out of his self-absorption. The other gods were initially hesitant. Direct intervention was a risky gamble, potentially upsetting the delicate balance of fate. But the growing chaos, the unchecked spread of the algorithmic curse, left them with little choice. They agreed, albeit with a healthy dose of trepidation, to Hermes's plan. The chosen day dawned bright and clear. Narcissus, lost in his usual pursuit of the perfect selfie, was oblivious to the brewing storm. He'd perfected a new technique, involving a complex interplay of light, water, and carefully manipulated glitches, resulting in self-portraits that were both stunningly beautiful and disturbingly disorienting. His online followers were ecstatic, showering him with virtual gifts and accolades. He was, in his self-absorbed world, at the peak of his digital influence. Then the heavens opened, not with the gentle rain of a summer shower, but with a torrential downpour of such intensity that it seemed to defy the laws of nature. The once calm waters of the pond exploded into a chaotic froth, the surface mirroring the storm raging above. Lightning cracked, illuminating the scene in an unnerving flash, each bolt accompanied by a deafening roar that echoed across the valley. The villagers, caught off guard, scrambled for cover, their meticulously curated digital images forgotten in the face of nature's fury. In the midst of the chaos, a majestic figure descended from the sky. It wasn't Zeus wielding his thunderbolt, nor Poseidon summoning his sea creatures. It was Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, his usually jovial face replaced by a serious, almost stern expression. Dionysus, a god often overlooked in matters of divine justice, had chosen this moment to make his presence known. He wasn't there to punish Narcissus, but to disrupt his carefully constructed world, to jolt him out of his self-imposed digital prison. As the rain lashed down and the wind howled, Dionysus strode towards Narcissus, his steps echoing through the storm. He carried no weapon, no divine instrument of punishment. He carried only a single, perfectly ripe grape glistening with the rain. He tossed it gently towards Narcissus, the grape arcing through the air before landing with a soft thud near the young man's feet. Narcissus, startled by the sudden interruption, looked up from his reflection. He saw the storm, the villagers scattering, and then the god Dionysus standing before him, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and amusement. For the first time since he'd begun his obsession, Narcissus saw something other than his own reflection. He saw the chaotic beauty of nature, the power of the storm, and the unexpected presence of a god. The grape still glistening with rain lay undisturbed. It was a simple act, yet it held profound significance. It was a reminder of the natural world, of the tangible beauty that existed outside the confines of his digital realm. It was an offering, a symbolic gesture meant to break the spell of his self-obsession, a disruption in the algorithmic curse. The storm raged on, but within Narcissus, something began to shift. The intensity of the divine intervention, the sheer unexpectedness of the event, cracked the shell of his self-absorption. He saw the folly of his obsession, the emptiness of his digital achievements, the missed opportunities to experience genuine human connection. The algorithmic curse was not broken instantly, but a crack had appeared, a chink in the armor of his self-obsession. The gods watched, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension as Narcissus, for the first time, looked beyond his reflection. The turning point had arrived. The divine disruption had been delivered, and its repercussions would be far-reaching. The storm eventually subsided, leaving behind a world both renewed and changed. The pond, once a mirror to Narcissus's vanity, now reflected the uncertain future. The villagers, shaken but unharmed, began to rebuild their lives, slowly weaning themselves off their digital obsession. The digital network, initially a source of connection and shared experience, was now seen with a newfound caution. Narcissus's digital influence was still palpable, but the power of his curse had been somewhat diminished. Its influence disrupted, its hold lessened. His followers began to question his authenticity. The glitches and distortions that had once captivated them now felt like a cynical manipulation. Narcissus, for his part, found himself lost and confused. The world, once confined to the narrow frame of his digital reflection, had expanded to encompass the wild beauty of nature and the unexpected power of the divine. He began to look outward, to interact with the villagers he'd previously ignored, to experience the simple pleasures he'd long neglected. The journey to recovery was far from over, but the first step had been taken. The divine disruption had initiated a process of healing and self-discovery, proving that even the most powerful algorithmic curses could be challenged, and that even the most self-absorbed individual could find redemption, even if it were wrought through a storm of divine intervention and a single glistening grape. The gods, having witnessed this transformation, pondered the future, the delicate balance between technology and human nature, and the unpredictable power of divine intervention in a world increasingly shaped by digital forces. The story of Narcissus, far from ending, was just beginning its most transformative chapter. The initial wave of adoration, the tsunami of likes and comments began to recede. The cracks, subtle at first, started appearing in Narcissus's seemingly flawless digital facade. It began with a single, almost inconsequential comment buried deep within the thousands of fawning messages. Is that really him? The lighting's too perfect. It was a seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of online skepticism. Soon, others echoed the sentiment, their voices rising above the chorus of praise. Too much Photoshop, one declared. He's got filters on filters on filters, another added. The meticulously crafted illusion of perfection was starting to crumble. The comments, initially dismissed as insignificant noise, began to coalesce into a distinct counter-narrative. A hashtag Narcissus is a fake started trending. Memes depicting Narcissus with exaggerated features and distorted proportions proliferated across the digital landscape. His carefully curated self-portraits, once the pinnacle of digital artistry, now served as the foundation for endless parodies and satirical reinterpretations. The backlash wasn't solely confined to the digital sphere. Word of Narcissus's obsession, initially treated as a quirky local legend, began to spread. Skeptical villagers, initially captivated by his digital displays, started questioning his reality. His neglect of his own physical well-being, previously overlooked amidst his online fame, became a subject of concern, even disdain. The whispers started turning into shouts. His reputation, once untarnished, began to tarnish. The perfect selfie, once a testament to his beauty, now seemed an unsettling testament to his artifice. The stillness required for his device to work had transformed him into a statue, a living embodiment of his own self-obsession. His followers, initially enchanted by his unattainable perfection, started to feel a sense of unease, a growing awareness of the vast gulf between the manufactured image and the reality that lay beneath. Echo, the cursed nymph, found herself in an unusual position. She was experiencing a newfound sense of purpose, a role beyond her typical repetitive commentary. Her glitches and echoes, once simply mirroring Narcissus's vanity, now took on a new, almost prophetic quality. Her fractured pronouncements, often nonsensical, seemed to anticipate the criticism and scorn that would inevitably be directed at Narcissus. Her words, previously dismissed as mere digital noise, were now seen by some as a cautionary tale, a premonition of the inevitable fall from grace. The gods, having initiated their intervention, watched with amused fascination and a touch of concern. Zeus, despite his initial amusement, began to see the value in negative feedback. Hera, ever the strategist, saw the opportunity to use this public dissatisfaction as a means of further destabilizing Narcissus's obsession. Apollo, ever the aesthete, found a certain morbid satisfaction in watching Narcissus's meticulously constructed image unravel, revealing the inherent instability of artificial perfection. Even Athena, who had previously struggled to counter the algorithmic curse, acknowledged that the tide of public opinion could be a potent force, perhaps even a more effective weapon than any divine intervention. Hermes, ever the opportunist, used the unfolding crisis to spread his own brand of mischief. He started subtly manipulating the algorithms, amplifying the negative feedback while simultaneously suppressing Narcissus's attempts at damage control. He unleashed a torrent of satirical memes and witty critiques that rapidly went viral, further undermining Narcissus's carefully cultivated persona. The digital landscape transformed into a battleground, a war between adulation and condemnation. Narcissus, for the first time, experienced the sting of public disapproval. The endless stream of praise had been a powerful narcotic, numbing him to his own flaws. The sudden influx of negativity shattered that illusion, revealing the insecurity and self-doubt that lay beneath the polished surface of his online persona. He tried to fight back to reclaim his position, but his attempts were clumsy and unconvincing. The expertly crafted images, the carefully chosen words now seemed hollow, transparent in the light of criticism. The situation spiraled out of control. Narcissus's online followers, once fiercely loyal, started to question his authenticity. His carefully constructed persona was unraveling, revealing the manufactured nature of his digital self. His efforts to defend himself only served to exacerbate the situation, each response fueling the fire of negative feedback. He was trapped in a digital feedback loop, his attempts to control the narrative only serving to amplify the criticisms. The once clear waters of his online fame were now murky, churned by the tempest of public opinion. He was drowning in a sea of negativity, his carefully constructed persona sinking beneath the weight of criticism. His carefully crafted image, once a symbol of perfection, now stood as a monument to vanity and self-deception. The once unquestioned authority of his digital presence was crumbling, revealing the fragility of an identity built on curated perfection. The gods watched, amused, yet also slightly concerned. They had unleashed a force they could only partially control, and now they would have to observe its chaotic dance as the narrative continued to unfold. The backlash was not only a response to Narcissus's vanity, it was a symptom of the larger societal obsession with curated online identities, a reflection of the anxieties and insecurities hidden behind the flawless masks of social media. The gods, however, were still amused, even slightly entertained at this grand, chaotic experiment in human nature unfolding before them in real time. The algorithmic curse had taken a decidedly unpredictable turn. Chapter 4: Reflection and Redemption. The pond, once a mirror reflecting Narcissus's flawless self-image, now mirrored a fractured reality. The surface, usually still and pristine, was ruffled by a disturbed wind, mirroring the turmoil within him. The reflection, once sharp and clear, was now distorted, fragmented, a mosaic of cracks and imperfections. It was a visual representation of his shattered online persona, a digital ruin reflected in the natural world. The meticulously crafted image, built painstakingly over months, had crumbled in a matter of days, leaving behind a residue of disappointment and self-doubt. The technology, his pride and joy, the very instrument of his self-obsession, had betrayed him. The perfect selfie camera, so flawlessly precise when he remained motionless, had become a cruel parody of his obsession. Any movement, even the slightest tremor of his hand, resulted in distorted images, glitches that underscored the artifice of his carefully constructed reality. The stillness demanded by the device had transformed him into a living statue, his very essence frozen in a state of self-admiration. Now the stillness felt less like meditative perfection and more like a prison, a gilded cage of his own making. The villagers, once awestruck by his digital perfection, now eyed him with a mixture of pity and disdain. Their initial fascination had given way to a kind of collective disillusionment. The myth, once a quirky local legend, had transformed into a cautionary tale, a dark satire of modern vanity. Their whispers followed him like shadows, their judgments sharp and unforgiving. He was no longer the enigmatic digital deity. He was just Narcissus, a man consumed by his own reflection, a man whose carefully crafted illusion had been shattered. The whispers transformed into murmurs, then into outright accusations, the collective voice of a community betrayed by its own fascination. Even Echo, the cursed nymph, found a strange sense of liberation in his downfall. Her repetitive commentary, once a mere echo of Narcissus's vanity, now held a darker, more prophetic tone. Her glitches and repetitions, previously dismissed as technical flaws, seemed to anticipate the eventual crash, a premonition of the shattered image staring back at him from the pond. Her words, once a frustrating reflection, now served as a sardonic soundtrack to his downfall, a digital chorus of ironic commentary. In a strange twist, her curse had been inadvertently fulfilled. The gods, observers of this grand digital drama, remained amused, albeit with a touch of concern. Zeus, the king of the gods, chuckled at the irony of Narcissus's downfall, the hubris of a mortal who dared to challenge the divine with technology. Hera, ever the strategist, saw the situation as a lesson in the ephemeral nature of online fame, a reminder that even the most meticulously constructed digital personas could be brought down by the capricious winds of public opinion. Apollo, the god of arts and beauty, felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. He saw the beauty in the destruction, the artistry in the collapse of Narcissus's digital empire. However, he also lamented the loss of potential, the wasted opportunity for genuine connection. Athena, goddess of wisdom, used the incident as a case study in human nature, a testament to the dangers of obsession. She analyzed the mechanics of the collapse, the algorithmic patterns that led to the swift downfall, and studied how the narrative spun out of control. She saw the incident as a cautionary tale, a digital parable of the flaws inherent in an online society obsessed with perfection. Even Hermes, the messenger god, found a certain morbid amusement in the situation, relishing the chaotic energy surrounding the unraveling narrative. He continued to manipulate the algorithms, ensuring the continued flow of satirical memes and critical commentary, further destabilizing Narcissus's attempts at damage control. Narcissus, grappling with the aftermath, experienced a profound sense of loss. The validation he craved, the endless stream of praise, was replaced by a torrent of criticism. His carefully constructed digital self had disintegrated, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. The silence that followed the storm of negative feedback was deafening, a stark contrast to the relentless noise of adoration that had previously defined his existence. He tried to salvage the situation, to repair the cracks in his digital persona, but each attempt only amplified the existing fractures. He attempted to rebuild his online presence, to re-establish his authority, but his efforts felt clumsy and insincere. The polished perfection of his previous images felt artificial, hollow. The followers, once fiercely loyal, turned away, their faith shaken by the exposure of his artifice. The once unwavering support had evaporated, leaving behind a void of disillusionment and doubt. The once clear waters of his online fame were now turbulent, churning with uncertainty and self-doubt. He retreated to the pond, seeking solace in its familiar reflection. But even the pond, once a source of narcissistic delight, seemed to mock him. His fragmented image, broken and distorted, mirrored the shattering of his meticulously built online world. He saw the truth in the reflection, not the flawless beauty he had long admired, but the vulnerability, the insecurity, the emptiness that had been masked beneath the polished surface of his carefully crafted digital identity. The algorithmic curse, initially a source of power and validation, had transformed into a cruel instrument of his downfall. The technology, once a tool for self-aggrandizement, had exposed his vanity and self-deception. The crash wasn't just a technological failure, it was a failure of character, a failure of self-awareness. The gods, watching from the heavens, observed the slow, painful process of Narcissus's redemption. His descent had been spectacular, but his ascent, if it were to occur, would require a different kind of reflection, a deeper understanding of himself, and a willingness to abandon the manufactured perfection of the digital world for the messy, unpredictable reality of human experience. The story of Narcissus, once a tale of vanity, was now evolving into a complex exploration of self-discovery, a journey from self-obsession to self-acceptance. The algorithmic curse had run its course, leaving behind a fractured reflection, a shattered persona, and a chance for genuine redemption. The gods, with a twinkle in their eye, awaited the next chapter. The pond, once a stage for Narcissus's narcissistic performance, now served as a witness to Echo's liberation. The water, still rippled by the lingering ghosts of his frantic movements, reflected a different kind of image, one of newfound freedom and burgeoning self-discovery. The air, once thick with the suffocating aroma of Narcissus's self-importance, now carried the crisp scent of possibility, a refreshing breeze after the storm of his downfall. Echo, no longer bound by the repetitive curse, found her voice clear and distinct, resonating with an unexpected strength. The glitches that had once defined her existence, the frustrating repetitions that mirrored Narcissus's self-absorbed pronouncements, were gone. In their place was a vibrant, nuanced expression, a symphony of individual thoughts and emotions that had been previously stifled, constrained by the echoing chamber of his vanity. It was as if the shattering of his digital persona had inadvertently broken the chains of her curse, freeing her to express herself fully without the suffocating weight of his echoing self-obsession. She no longer repeated his words, mimicking his vanity. Instead, she sang her own song, a melody born from the ashes of his downfall, a celebration of her liberated voice. Her song was a complex tapestry woven with threads of sorrow, relief, anger, and newfound joy, a testament to her resilience, her capacity for growth, and her remarkable journey from a cursed echo to an independent voice. It was a song of self-discovery, a testament to her power to transcend the limitations imposed upon her. The willows that wept over the pond seemed to listen more attentively now, their leaves rustling in time with Echo's melody. The frogs, once startled by Narcissus's sudden movements, croaked in harmony with her song, their voices blending seamlessly with the flowing notes, creating a tranquil, enchanting soundscape. Even the reeds, swaying gently in the breeze, appeared to dance to the rhythm of her newfound freedom. The pond itself seemed to resonate with her song, its surface shimmering with an ethereal glow, a magical reflection of her triumphant voice. Her newfound freedom wasn't just a liberation from Narcissus's influence. It was a liberation from the very essence of her curse. She had spent centuries trapped in a cycle of repetition, unable to express herself authentically. Her identity had been inextricably linked to his, defined by his words, his actions, his very being. Now, free from that parasitic existence, she was forging her own identity, defining herself on her own terms. She explored the world around the pond, venturing beyond its familiar confines, her curiosity piqued by the vastness of the surrounding landscape. She discovered hidden pathways, secret groves, and breathtaking vistas, each encounter enriching her understanding of herself and her place in the world. The sun warmed her skin, the wind played with her hair, and the earth provided a grounding presence. She felt the sensual richness of existence, a world previously blocked by the oppressive echo of Narcissus's voice. She met other nymphs, sprites, and woodland creatures she had only ever glimpsed from the periphery of Narcissus's world, hidden within the digital confines of his self-obsession. They shared stories, songs, and secrets, enriching her perspective, challenging her assumptions, and widening her horizons. She found a sisterhood, a sense of belonging, a communal support that had been previously absent from her existence. Her newfound identity was not solely a rejection of Narcissus, it was an embrace of self-discovery. She engaged in introspection, delving deep into the layers of her being, exploring the depths of her emotions, and understanding her own strengths and weaknesses. The repetitive nature of her curse, once a source of pain and frustration, now became a tool for self-reflection, a reminder of the cyclical nature of life, the importance of embracing both growth and decay. The villagers, who once only acknowledged her as the irritating echo of Narcissus's vanity, now heard her voice, a voice independent, unique, and captivating. Their whispers transformed into awed murmurs as they listened to her song, a song of resilience and liberation, a song that celebrated the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity. They understood finally that the echo they had previously dismissed was not merely a reflection of Narcissus, but a vibrant entity in her own right. They had underestimated her, categorized her, stifled her existence through their own preconceptions. Now they saw her as she truly was. The gods, observing from their celestial abode, were equally impressed. Zeus chuckled at the irony, Hera nodded sagely, Apollo expressed approval. Athena took notes for her ever-evolving treatise on human behavior, and Hermes simply declared it the best entertainment he'd had in millennia. Even the most cynical of the gods, Hades, couldn't help but appreciate the poignant beauty of Echo's transformation. The pond remained, but its significance had shifted. It was no longer a mirror reflecting Narcissus's vanity, but a tranquil sanctuary, a source of inspiration, a testament to Echo's resilience. The fragmented reflection of Narcissus served as a constant reminder of the past, a catalyst for Echo's transformation. Her liberation was not a simple act of escaping his shadow, it was an act of claiming her own light, a defiant assertion of her individuality. The story, far from being over, had reached a turning point, a pivotal moment where the narrative shifted its focus from the fall of one to the ascent of another. Echo's journey had only just begun. Her song, once a faint and repetitive whisper, now filled the air with the strength and beauty of a truly independent voice. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pond, painting the water in hues of orange and gold. Echo continued to sing, her voice carrying on the evening breeze, a testament to her newfound freedom, a melody of redemption and self-discovery. The villagers listened, mesmerized, their hearts touched by her story, a story that transcended the realm of mythology, resonating with the universal themes of resilience, self-acceptance, and the liberating power of self-expression. The narrative of Narcissus and Echo had always been intertwined, a story of echoes and reflections. But now the balance had shifted. Narcissus's story remained a cautionary tale, a chilling parable of self-obsession and the dangers of living a life dictated by the fickle approval of others. However, Echo's story offered a counterpoint, a hopeful narrative that celebrated resilience, independence, and the transformative power of self-discovery. The pond, once a stage for vanity, now bore witness to a different kind of performance, a celebration of life, a testament to the enduring human capacity for growth and transformation. And as the stars emerged, twinkling in the darkening sky, Echo's song continued, a beacon of hope, a melody that resonated with the echoes of liberation, reminding everyone within earshot that even from the depths of a curse, beauty, strength, and a truly individual voice could emerge. The future remained unwritten, but Echo, liberated and empowered, was ready to write her own story. The gods, from their heavenly perches, observed with keen interest, anticipating the next chapter in this unfolding, complex, and unexpectedly poignant tale. The story of Narcissus, once a tale of vanity, was now a testament to the power of redemption, a story of two intertwined destinies that ultimately diverged, each finding its own path towards a different kind of reflection. The shattered fragments of Narcissus's digital persona lay scattered around the pond, like broken pieces of a mirror reflecting a distorted reality. He himself, stripped bare of his carefully curated online image, felt strangely lighter. The weight of constant self-promotion, the relentless pursuit of the perfect selfie, the desperate need for validation through likes and comments, all of it had vanished, leaving behind a disconcerting emptiness, yet strangely freeing. The pond, once his obsessive stage, now felt less like a mirror and more like a still, clear pool reflecting a world previously obscured by his own vanity. For the first time, he saw his reflection not as a flawless stranger to be worshipped, but as, well, himself. All the flaws, the imperfections, the wrinkles around his eyes that he'd meticulously airbrushed away in his digital world were now starkly visible. And yet there was a certain honesty in this unfiltered reflection. It was unsettling at first, this raw, unedited version of himself, but it wasn't entirely unpleasant. It was undeniably him. He looked beyond the shimmering surface of the water, noticing the willows for the first time, their weeping branches heavy with the weight of untold stories. He saw the reeds swaying rhythmically in the breeze, a silent ballet performed for no audience but the sun and the sky. He even saw the frogs, their croaks no longer a jarring interruption to his self-obsession, but a part of the natural symphony of the pond. The world, once a mere backdrop for his narcissistic performances, suddenly felt vibrant, alive, and full of details he had previously ignored. He noticed Echo, truly noticed her for the first time, no longer the frustrating, repetitive echo of his own pronouncements, but a unique individual with a powerful, independent voice that resonated with a strength he had never acknowledged. Her song, a melody woven with threads of sorrow and joy, filled the air, a testament to her resilience, a celebration of her liberation. He listened, captivated, finally hearing her, truly hearing her, without the filter of his own self-absorption. He was struck by the depth of her emotions, the complex tapestry of her experiences, a richness he'd never considered before in his single-minded pursuit of self-image. He watched her move gracefully through the world, her newfound freedom evident in every gesture, every step, every note of her song. She was unapologetically herself, a stark contrast to his previous carefully crafted persona. He felt a twinge of something admiration, respect, perhaps even shame, as he witnessed her journey of self-discovery. Her transformation was a reflection of his own potential for growth, a potential he had stubbornly ignored in his obsessive pursuit of external validation. His encounter with the villagers was equally transformative. He approached them tentatively, his usual air of self-importance replaced by an uncharacteristic humility. He found them to be more complex and nuanced than he had ever imagined. He listened to their stories, their concerns, their dreams, hearing not just echoes of his own vanity, but the genuine voices of a community. He shared his own story, not as a boastful tale of his digital success, but as a confession of his self-imposed blindness. Their response was not the immediate adoration he had craved, but a hesitant acceptance, a willingness to see past the shadow of his past behavior and offer a chance for genuine connection. He started spending more time with the villagers, participating in their daily lives, engaging in genuine human interactions, unfiltered and unedited. He helped with the harvest, shared stories around the bonfire, and even learned to play a simple tune on a panpipe, his fingers clumsy but his heart engaged. He found a sense of belonging, a feeling of connection he had never experienced in his solitary world of self-obsession. The absence of his digital world created a space for genuine relationships, for unfiltered empathy, for true understanding. The laughter shared around the bonfire was far more fulfilling than any number of digital likes. This new life wasn't about crafting a new image, but about cultivating a new self. He discovered a passion for sculpting, using clay to create small figures inspired by the villagers, the natural world, and even Echo, capturing her strength and resilience in his work. His hands, once preoccupied with adjusting his digital image, were now occupied with molding something real, something tangible, something lasting. He learned the value of simple pleasures, the warmth of the sun on his face, the taste of fresh bread, the feeling of wind rustling through his hair. He found beauty in the ordinary, in the natural world, in the human connection, finding joy in things he'd never had the time to appreciate before. The gods observing his transformation were equally intrigued. Zeus, no longer amused by his vanity, felt a grudging respect for his capacity for self-reflection and genuine change. Hera, ever the pragmatist, noted his improved social skills and capacity for empathy. Even Hades, the most cynical of them all, couldn't help but acknowledge the positive shift in Narcissus's character. His redemption wasn't a divine intervention, but a personal journey, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Narcissus's story wasn't simply a tale of falling from grace. It was a story of rising from the ashes of self-obsession, a journey from a meticulously crafted digital persona to an authentic self, discovered through genuine connection and self-reflection. The pond, once a stage for vanity, became a symbol of transformation, reflecting not a distorted image, but a clear and honest portrait of a man who had finally found his way back from the brink. He found that true beauty lay not in the perfect image, but in the imperfection, in the vulnerability, in the genuine connection with oneself and others. His journey was a reminder that even those consumed by self-love can find redemption, proving that transformation is possible even when the odds seem insurmountable. The echoes of his past remained, but they were now overshadowed by the resonance of his newfound authenticity, his genuine connection to the world around him, and his acceptance of his own imperfect self. His redemption was not a return to his former self, but a birth into a new one, a self defined not by filtered images and digital validation, but by genuine human connection and self acceptance. His story, once a tragedy of vanity, became a testament to the remarkable capacity for change inherent in the human spirit. The air thrummed with an almost palpable energy, a shift in the cosmic currents that even the willows seemed to sense, their branches swaying in a silent acknowledgement of the impending decision. Zeus, perched atop Mount Olympus, his brow furrowed in a rare moment of contemplation, surveyed the scene below. Hera, ever the shrewd observer, sat beside him, her expression a carefully masked mixture of amusement and anticipation. Even Hades, usually found brooding in the shadowy depths of the underworld, had ventured to the summit, his usual grim demeanor softened by a flicker of curiosity. Narcissus, unaware of the divine council convened in his honor, continued his quiet existence in the village. His hands, once so deft at manipulating digital images, were now equally skilled at shaping clay, his sculptures capturing the essence of the people around him, their laughter lines, their weary hands, their resilient spirits. He'd found a rhythm in his new life, a contentment that hadn't come from external validation, but from internal peace. The constant hum of social media notifications had been replaced by the gentle chirping of crickets, a far more harmonious soundtrack to his existence. The transformation wasn't solely his own doing. Echo, freed from her curse, had become a constant source of encouragement, her voice no longer a repetitive echo, but a powerful, supportive counterpoint to his own self-doubt. She'd helped him navigate the complexities of his new relationships, offering insightful perspectives and gentle guidance. Their connection, once defined by his vanity, had blossomed into a genuine friendship, a testament to the transformative power of empathy and understanding. The villagers, initially wary of his sudden shift in character, had gradually accepted him, drawn in by his genuine humility and willingness to contribute to the community. He was no longer the aloof, self-obsessed Narcissus, but a valued member of their society, sharing in their joys and sorrows, contributing his skills, and offering a listening ear. His past still cast a shadow, but it was a shadow that was slowly being overtaken by the brightness of his new life. He had woven himself into the fabric of their lives, finding a place in the sun-drenched tapestry of their community. He even learned to bake bread, his loaves, though initially misshapen, eventually becoming renowned for their surprising tenderness. The gods, observing this metamorphosis, were faced with a dilemma. Punishment seemed inadequate, considering the depth of his self-reflection and genuine change. Yet simply letting him continue his newfound existence felt anticlimactic, given his initial transgression. After a protracted debate, as protracted as any political squabble amongst the mortals below, Zeus cleared his throat, the sound echoing across the heavens. "He has shown remarkable growth," Zeus declared, his voice booming with authority, yet tinged with a surprising softness. "He has not merely escaped the consequences of his actions, but actively sought redemption. His transformation is a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. Hera nodded, a rare expression of approval gracing her lips. His understanding of genuine human connection is remarkable. His ability to build meaningful relationships has improved exponentially. The villagers accept him, that says a great deal. Hades surprisingly chimed in. Even in the underworld, we appreciate a good redemption story. Besides, he added, with a hint of a sardonic smile, it would be terribly boring if everyone just stayed stuck in their own self-made hells. Their consensus settled on a decision. Narcissus would not be punished, but neither would he be simply absolved. His redemption would not be a gift bestowed by the gods, but a continuing journey, a testament to his own capacity for growth and perseverance. They decided to amplify his existing transformation, to provide him with an opportunity to make a significant positive impact on the world. The following dawn, Narcissus awoke to a peculiar sight. Not a new social media notification, but a shimmering, ethereal object resting gently beside his simple clay sculpture of Echo. It appeared to be a polished obsidian mirror, reflecting not his physical form, but an inner landscape. It was a mirror reflecting not his vanity, but his empathy, his resilience, his compassion for others. A scroll accompanied it, a scroll bearing an inscription written in elegant, celestial script. The gods see your reflection. May your journey inspire others to find their own true selves. The mirror's powers were subtle but profound. It allowed Narcissus to see beyond the superficial, to perceive the needs and emotions of those around him with unparalleled clarity. He could sense their unspoken anxieties, their hidden joys, their deepest hopes and fears. This new awareness heightened his empathy, allowing him to connect with others on a profound level. Narcissus used this unique gift to create a profound positive influence on the lives of the villagers. He acted as a mediator, resolving conflicts with surprising diplomacy, his understanding of their emotions proving to be invaluable. He inspired them to embrace their creative talents, fostering a sense of community and collaboration. His own sculpting skills flourished, his work reflecting not merely physical forms, but the emotional depth of his subjects. His sculptures were no longer just figures of clay, but windows into the souls of his community. He established a workshop, teaching others the art of sculpting and nurturing their artistic expression. His teachings extended beyond mere techniques, encompassing the importance of self-expression and the power of creative exploration to heal emotional wounds. The village, once a quiet, isolated community, transformed into a vibrant hub of creativity and self-discovery, all inspired by the man who had once been obsessed with his own reflection. Years passed. Narcissus, having embraced his redemption, became a symbol of hope and transformation, proving that even the most self-absorbed could find a path toward empathy and genuine connection. His story became a legendary tale told and retold, not as a cautionary example of vanity, but as an inspiring narrative of self-discovery and redemption. The pond, once a stage for his narcissistic performances, became a tranquil sanctuary, reflecting not only the beauty of the natural world, but the inner peace he had finally achieved. The echoes of his past still lingered, but they were now harmonized with the stronger, more resonant melody of his life, lived in service to others. A life built on genuine connection, compassion, and the unfiltered beauty of the human spirit. His tale served as a constant reminder that transformation is possible, even when the mirror reflects back a distorted image, and that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in the authentic reflection of a soul that has found its true way. And somewhere up on Mount Olympus the gods smiled. Their verdict had been rendered not in thunderbolts and punishment, but in the quiet, enduring power of redemption. The obsidian mirror, a gift from the gods, wasn't merely a reflective surface, it was a window into the soul. It didn't show Narcissus his physical features, meticulously crafted and digitally enhanced as they once were, but rather the intricate tapestry of his inner life. He saw not the shallow reflection of a vain young man, but a complex individual capable of profound empathy and genuine connection. The initial shock gave way to a quiet awe, a humbling recognition of his own capacity for growth. He had spent so long chasing the fleeting perfection of a digital image, oblivious to the richness of the world around him. Now, the mirror revealed a world previously unseen, a world of unspoken emotions, hidden anxieties, and subtle gestures that spoke volumes more than any carefully curated selfie ever could. He started small. He noticed the worried furrow in Alara's brow as she tended her ailing goats, the silent burden she carried beneath her cheerful exterior. He offered to help, not with grand gestures or pronouncements, but with simple acts of kindness, sharing the weight of her concern. He saw the unspoken longing in the eyes of young Damon, a boy ostracized for his quiet nature, and extended a hand of friendship, patiently drawing him out of his shell. The mirror had sharpened his senses, attuned him to the silent language of the heart. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he judged, and understood more than he ever thought possible. His sculpting took on a new dimension. His hands, once solely dedicated to capturing the idealized version of himself, now shaped the complex realities of others. He molded not just faces but emotions, capturing the quiet strength of the village elder, the playful energy of the children, the weary resignation of the farmer, and the boundless joy of a mother cradling her newborn. His art transformed from a narcissistic exercise into an act of empathy, each sculpture a testament to the unique beauty and resilience of the human spirit. Word of his transformation spread beyond the village. People from neighboring communities came seeking his counsel, drawn by the quiet wisdom radiating from him. He listened patiently to their stories, offering not solutions but a compassionate presence, a space where they felt seen, heard, and understood. He became a confidant, a mediator, a gentle guide, navigating the complexities of human relationships. His past, once a source of shame, became a foundation for understanding, a reminder of the pitfalls of self-obsession and the transformative power of self-reflection. He established a small school, teaching others the art of sculpting, not as a means to achieve external validation, but as a form of self-expression, a tool for inner peace. He encouraged them to look beyond the surface to find beauty not in perfection but in authenticity. His lessons extended beyond the technical aspects of sculpting, encompassing the art of observation, empathy, and genuine connection. He shared his experiences, his journey from self-obsession to self-acceptance, inspiring his students to embark on their own paths of self-discovery. His life wasn't without its challenges. He faced moments of self-doubt, echoes of his past whispering temptations of vanity, but the mirror served as a constant reminder reflecting his inner strength, his resilience, his capacity for love and compassion. He learned to embrace imperfection, to see the beauty in flaws both in himself and in others. He accepted that the pursuit of the perfect selfie is a Sisyphean task, an endless chase after an unattainable ideal. True beauty, he realized, lay not in external appearances, meticulously crafted and digitally filtered, but in the authentic expression of the self, in the genuine connections forged with others, in the quiet moments of shared understanding and compassion. The pond, Once the stage for his narcissistic performances became a place of quiet reflection, a sanctuary where he found peace and solitude. He often sat by its edge, observing the ripples spreading across its surface, each ripple a metaphor for the interconnectedness of life, the ripple effect of his actions on the lives of others. He no longer sought to capture his own reflection, but to reflect the beauty he saw in the world around him, a beauty that was infinitely more profound and enduring than any fleeting image captured by a lens. His story became a legend, not a cautionary tale of vanity, but an inspiring narrative of transformation and redemption. His name, once synonymous with self-absorption, became associated with empathy, compassion, and the art of genuine connection. He had found his true reflection, not in a polished surface, but in the eyes of those he loved, in the smiles of those he had helped, in the quiet peace of his own heart. He had moved beyond the selfie, beyond the superficial, beyond the limitations of his past, into a realm of profound self-acceptance and genuine human connection. The gods, observing from Olympus, nodded in silent approval. Their experiment, their gamble on humanity's capacity for change, had paid off. Narcissus, once lost in the labyrinth of his own vanity, had found his way, forging a new path, a testament to the transformative power of self-reflection and the enduring beauty of the human spirit. His journey, they knew, would continue to inspire, reminding others that even the most self-absorbed individual can find redemption, can find a way to reflect the brilliance within. The echoes of his former self still lingered, faint whispers in the wind, but they were now vastly outnumbered by the symphony of a life lived with purpose, a life reflected in the countless hearts he touched.